I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 Abnormal Operation. Hilliard, the mentor of the Light Medicine clan, stood quietly in the distance, calm and composed, watching the situation on the field. This attitude had already caused dissatisfaction among the other two groups. Clean turned his eyes and looked at Hilliard. After his mouth twitched, he said fiercely, "Hilliard, what do you mean? You help us one moment and help Fitch the next." Hilliard gently raised his right hand, and a 2-foot-long spoon-shaped weapon appeared in his hand. His eyes kept looking at the weapon in his hand, as if he didn't hear Clean's words, and he said to himself, "The Light Medicine clan focuses on saving the dying and healing the wounded. Both of you are Florentines. No matter who of you is injured, I will do my best to treat you. This is also the responsibility of our Light Medicine." Clean snorted coldly and said, "Hilliard, don't pretend to be a good person. Now I give you two choices. Either join our death medicine camp like the aliens, or you will be our enemy. You'd better open your eyes and see clearly. There are 5 of us now." Hilliard didn't care, snorted lightly, and replied disdainfully, "Whatever you say, I still say that. You can fight as much as you want. I'm only responsible for saving the dying and healing the wounded. You." Clean showed a dissatisfied expression, turned his eyes, looked at Jeremy beside him, and said, "Jeremy, since Guangaio is unwilling to cooperate, the 3 of us, the death medicine, will work together to kill him first, and you stop Fitch and the others." Jeremy did not answer immediately, but turned his eyes to his companion Hal. Hal nodded slightly, but did not say a word, but when he nodded, his eyes blinked slightly, as if sending out some signal. Jeremy immediately understood what he saw, and then replied, "Okay Clean, leave Fitch to me." Seeing Jeremy agreed, Clean then winked at Thor and Elite, and whispered, "Let's go." As soon as the voice fell, the 3 of them turned around, and looked at Hilliard. With 3-1, it must be a sure win, but Hilliard was still calm and unhurried, without any worries at all. This abnormal confidence was indeed weird. Clean and his companions had just taken a few steps, and had not yet launched an attack when a green light suddenly flashed behind them, and a long object flew over. Then, a deafening scream of "Ah!" was heard, and a strange scene occurred. A vine sprang out from Jeremy's hand, like a strange snake, and at the top of the vine was a flower bud, but now the flower bud opened its mouth like a lion, and each petal was covered with sharp teeth. The flower bud bit Thor's body tightly with its big mouth, and blood kept flowing out from its teeth. Clean looked at Thor, who was bitten beside him, turned his head stiffly, and looked at Jeremy with angry eyes. What do you mean? You actually attacked our death medicine clan?" Clean said Jeremy's name from between his teeth, a little annoyed. Jeremy smiled and said, "Clean, this Thor is from the Fixie people, so he is an outsider anyway. Now it's a battle between our 4 major races. Shouldn't this outsider die?" He said so, but everyone present knew his inner intentions. Once Thor died, there would be only 2 people left in the death medicine clan, and the number of people would be relatively balanced. Jeremy raised his right hand, and the vines and buds were attracted like ropes. The vines were wrapped around Jeremy's arms, and the buds closed and nestled beside his head. Thor fell to the bottom with a plop, and became a corpse. Clean, now there is no outsider interfering. You can deal with Hilliard with confidence, and Hal and I will stop Fitch and the others. Jeremy continued to speak, as if nothing had happened just now, but Clean was already furious, and he looked at Jeremy with narrowed eyes. While the fighting was going on outside, inside the cave, Li Ming sat cross-legged on the altar. His body was covered with flowing starlight, as if a pile of stardust was rotating around him. Li Ming showed a satisfied smile on his face, slowly opened his eyes, and whispered to himself, "This is the 6th order civilization. It's really extraordinary." The powerful force was flowing in his body. This kind of growth was unprecedented, and this feeling was also different from the past. Li Ming could easily sense the changes in his body and the pleasure of powerful power. At this time, when he recalled his memories of the 5th order civilization, he felt that the 5th order civilization was really naive and ignorant. As the civilization advanced, the memory fragments in Li Ming's brain began to merge rapidly, and a large amount of cognition began to appear automatically in his brain. Invisibly, Li Ming had already gained a lot of knowledge. The star altar under his buttocks had exhausted its gravity, and was of no use at all. The starlight above his head had turned completely black, as if it had just been roasted by high temperature. These two things were naturally useless at the moment. They were just ordinary meteorites. Congratulations, you have entered the 6th level civilization. Moore looked at Li Ming on the high platform, and said in a low voice. There was no excitement in his words, nor was there anything else unusual. It was just plain, as if it was commonplace. Li Ming glanced at the other party and didn't care, but the other party's tone made Li Ming feel a little uncomfortable. 6th level civilization, that is already a mental level existence on Fuller Star. This Mer is just a star beast, how can he understand it? Li Ming shook his head slightly, or thought flashed through his mind, and a consciousness appeared. Li Ming's body suddenly stiffened in place, an unusual ecstasy appeared on his face, and he whispered to himself, but I still have the insect flower fruit, which is the best thing for the 6th level, to enter the 7th level, and there is no need for star glory and star altar. Today I might as well. Just as Li Ming was thinking, Mer flapped his wings, flew to Li Ming's shoulder, and said, the advancement is complete. What are you going to do? Li Ming glanced at Mer, his face still serious, and replied coldly, you'd better stay away for now, the advancement is not over yet. Not over? Mer looked puzzled. Li Ming nodded slightly and continued, I will tell you, when it is completely over. Moore felt a little abnormal at this time. After a light snort, he flapped his wings, and flew back to the platform. His eyes showed contempt, and he said to himself, damn it, I want to see what tricks you can play. Li Ming turned his right hand in front of him, and a white fruit appeared in his palm. It was only the size of an ordinary date. It was the insect flower fruit. Li Ming, who was already a 6th level civilization, had a much better understanding of the insect flower fruit. It was a blessing to be able to get such a rare thing. Its unique effect could not be replaced by other items. Adjusting his breath, moving enough energy, and slapping his palm towards his mouth, Li Ming swallowed the fruit directly. The energy in the insect flower fruit is powerful, but gentle, not as violent as the power of the nebula. It is precisely this that saves him from relying on Zingao and Zington. The energy flows slowly from the abdomen to the whole body like a hot spring, and he feels comfortable. Li Ming closed his eyes tightly and felt the power, but soon after taking it, Li Ming frowned, and his expression looked a little ugly. It must be that the energy of the 6th level civilization that has just advanced is not stable enough, so this feeling. Although Li Ming realized something at this time, it was obviously too late. After the civilization advances, it is a comprehensive improvement of the body and cognition. There will be no abnormality in cognition, which is mainly based on the previous accumulation, but energy is different from the body. This is like Li Ming could only pick up 200 kilograms of objects before, but now he can pick up 400 kilograms, but he still needs constant exercise to stabilize and maintain it. But Li Ming acted too hastily, and took the insect flower fruit directly, which has certain side effects for the unstable body. This is also the result of Li Ming's lack of cognition, but now the arrow is on the string, and has to be shot, so he can only bite the bullet, and continue to operate. Moore on the high platform seemed to see the abnormality. He was surprised at first, then sighed slightly, and said to himself, stupid low-level creatures are like this. This operation. I give you full marks. Let's see how you end it. Li Ming was worried, and he continued to sense the changes in his body, and look for abnormalities. A huge problem has been placed in front of Li Ming. Chapter 127, 7th Order Civilization. Li Ming spent a very short time from the completion of the 6th Order Civilization to the activation, and directly advanced to the 7th Order Civilization. Although it has no effect on the growth of cognition, the energy deficiency will be greatly affected. Simply put, even if Li Ming advances to the 7th Order Civilization, the use of energy will only be below the 7th Order, and above the 6th Order, which is an incomplete advancement. This is not impossible to make up for. as long as the nebula power is taken to replenish the deficient energy. This forced replenishment behavior will inevitably bring risks, because the nebula power is unstable. Without the star and the star altar, it will bring severe side effects to the body, and even the nebula will be broken. As the energy of the insect flower fruit slowly spreads in the body, Li Ming must make a decision immediately. At this moment, Mo's voice suddenly sounded in Li Ming's mind. "Don't worry, I will help you suppress the energy overflow of the flesh." Mo said this after seeing Li Ming's abnormality. This guy can assist me? Li Ming was a little skeptical and said to himself. After some hesitation, Li Ming heard Mo's voice in his mind. "To tell you the truth, the star accord without civilization that I showed you was modified by me. There is a wrong message in it. That is, I will not produce low-level items such as star feathers. But there is one thing you don't know. That is, I'm the only one among the star beasts who can assist civilized creatures in their advancement." Mo said coldly. When this sentence came out, even Li Ming, who was still in the process of advancement, was shocked. However, Li Ming didn't dare to think about it at this time. His whole mind was still immersed in the advancement. Since things had come to this point, Li Ming still had to try his best to achieve the perfect 7th level civilization strength, even if it was worth taking some risks. As for whether Mo would help, or if he really had the ability in this regard, it was impossible to be sure. The energy of the insect flower fruit was still spreading in his body. Li Ming flipped his right hand and took out a star bag. In order to make up for the lack of energy caused by continuous advancement, Li Ming could only forcibly replenish the power of the nebula. A white light flashed on the star bag, and a bowl floated out. Li Ming looked at the nebula power in front of him and hesitated. He felt a little more conflicted. One nebula power is not enough. Continuous advancement will lead to energy deficiency in the body. At least 3 nebula powers are needed. According to my calculations, you have a 78% chance of success, of course with my help. Mo's voice sounded in his mind again. Li Ming had a sad face and regretted it in his heart. He cursed inwardly. Damn it, I played a good hand like this. In regret, Li Ming gritted his teeth and snorted. I'll do it once and for all. Could it be that I will break the nebula? With a determined heart, Li Ming's hand flashed with white light, and 2 more nebula powers flew out. Li Ming opened his mouth without hesitation and swallowed the 3 nebula powers directly into his mouth. Mo narrowed his eyes slightly when he saw this, and his body suddenly glowed red. A huge shadow had appeared. This time the shadow was not in the shape of a flame, but a giant red bird. Mo flapped his wings, and the giant bird phantom soared into the air in front of Li Ming. A pair of red feather wings wrapped Li Ming like 2 big hands, and the posture was as if the giant bird was holding Li Ming in its arms. The red light phantom at this time was different from the previous Wukong ability. Wukong ability was a huge mental force formed by ideology, but the phantom in front of him was completely formed by energy. After Li Ming swallowed the power of 3 nebulae, the originally stable power of insects, flowers and fruits became unstable, and his body began to show various uncertain conditions. The first thing that came was a series of headaches. This kind of pain was not unfamiliar. Li Ming had experienced it when he advanced to the 5th level civilization on Earth. Still, this kind of pain appeared. Li Ming endured the pain and kept calming his mind. The current pain was still within Li Ming's tolerance, but it was unknown what would happen in a while. Just when Li Ming was uneasy, the pain suddenly eased. It felt like there was a star shining outside the body, forcibly suppressing the violent nebula power. After a little sensing, Li Ming found that it was this guy Ma who was helping Li Ming suppress this power. Ma, this star beast, actually has this ability? Li Ming opened his mouth in surprise, and his consciousness was almost completely immersed in Ma. As far as star beasts are concerned, they are 1 in a million. They are an independent life born from the wild beasts under the right time, right place and right people. This is already very rare, but if there is a star beast that can give birth to star feathers, it is even rarer. But the ability of Ma in front of him has obviously surpassed the above 2, becoming the best among the rare ones. Can you hurry up, kid? I don't have that much energy. Ma ordered angrily. Li Ming didn't dare to think about it anymore. He could talk about Ma later. The most important thing now is to concentrate on absorbing the energy of the insect flower fruit and the nebula power in his body. The energy of the insect flower fruit plus the 3 nebula powers are enough to make up for Li Ming's energy deficiency from continuous advancement. The most important thing now is to speed up the absorption of this energy and achieve the purpose of advancement. Time passed by little. Li Ming's eyes were still closed, but the advancement was nearing the end. His limbs, brain, and body were all undergoing tremendous changes. The feeling was refreshing and indescribable. Ha ha ha. Li Ming's mouth had already burst into laughter, and powerful energy began to flow around him. With a muffled sound of bang, it seemed as if something exploded deep in his heart. This was not Li Ming's feeling, but the feeling of everyone nearby, as if a wave suddenly spread and hit his heart. The ripples spread out from the cave as the center, and the powerful impact penetrated all objects, and hit every life affected. The giant beast Isaac, who was lying leisurely outside the cave, suddenly changed his expression. His eyes widened a little, and his eyeballs turned slightly to look behind him. The 4 major races that were fighting suddenly stopped and looked at each other. This power is. Clean narrowed his eyes and looked at the cave in trance behind the giant beast, and the others also looked there. 7th order civilization? Fitch, who was not far away, exclaimed directly and said again, "That's right. This is the breath of the 7th order civilization. The high priest is here." There was a commotion and panic in the crowd. High priest? Which tribe will he be from? Clean whispered, and his eyes turned to Elite beside him. Just as everyone was muttering to themselves, Li Ming in the cave slowly opened his eyes, his mouth corners slightly raised, with a smile on his face, and slowly stood up from the ground. Not only the breath, but also the words and deeds are very different from before. But at this moment, Li Ming was suddenly stunned. His eyes widened a little, looking at the ground in front of him. I saw more lying on the ground with his dying breath, and he made a low cry in his mouth, saying, "Damn, hurry. I'm almost tired to death." Li Ming hurriedly stepped forward and leaned over to pick up more. Looking at the weak Moor, he couldn't help but smile bitterly, then unbuttoned his shirt and gently put Moor in his arms. "Have a good rest, and I will take care of the rest." As he spoke, Li Ming gently patted Moor, looking as if to comfort him. Moor glanced at Li Ming angrily, then slowly closed his eyes and stopped talking. Chapter 128 She Wants Revenge? Exclamation mark. After walking around the platform, Li Ming returned to the stone house. He saw Xenia standing quietly in front of the wall, staring at the star furnace without blinking. After hearing the noise, Xenia suddenly turned around and looked at Li Ming. After a slight smile, she said, "Brother Li Ming, is it okay?" Li Ming raised the corner of his mouth slightly, with a smile on his face, and said softly, "Of course." Then cut it off quickly. Xenia said anxiously. Li Ming took 2 steps forward and came to the cave wall on the right. With his right hand, he grabbed the star furnace directly into his hand. After a slight sense, Li Ming was shocked. In just a short while, the star furnace actually absorbed a lot of energy here. With a light squeeze of his palm, the star furnace disappeared in his palm. Li Ming showed a look of thinking about something else. After hesitating for a while, he slowly turned around. "Xenia, you should know that once this pipeline is disconnected, Isaac will be free and will be completely released. This is very dangerous for anyone here." Li Ming looked at Xenia and said softly. Xenia was stunned for a moment. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. After blinking a few times, she said, So, you are not going to help me?" Li Ming squatted down with a smile on his face and said, "I know what you need. So I want to help you in another way." "Another way?" "No. I don't need it. You lied to me, Brother Li Ming. How could you lie to me?" Xenia suddenly became angry. Her mouth pouted, and she seemed very angry. Li Ming remained calm and continued, "I did this for your own good. After all, the Fixie tribe still needs to continue. Although I'm an outsider, I know very well about the 2 major tribes of Fuller Star. What you know is just one-sided, and there is still a big gap from the facts." Although Li Ming's tone was gentle, the content of his words surprised Xenia, and she stared at Li Ming blankly. Back then, the Florans colluded with the Star Raiders Alliance and staged the Star Raiders incident. In fact, it was for the star status of you, the Fixie people. That's why after the Star Raiders incident, the Fixie people were almost exterminated, but the Florans did not suffer any losses. For biological civilization, mastering synthesis and alchemy is equivalent to mastering the lifeblood of the civilization. Now the Florents have not achieved their goal. As an important figure of the Fixie people, are you going to give up resistance just like that? Li Ming stood up again while speaking, his eyes half closed, looking down at Xenia. These words shocked Xenia. Her expression trembled slightly, and she said, "No, I didn't give up resistance. I released Isaac to kill those people outside. I want revenge. Since I got this news from the Fixie people, managed by Thor that day, I decided to take revenge," Xenia said firmly, her eyes full of resentment. Li Ming looked calm, and then said, "Xenia, does killing a few 6th level mentors count as revenge? The one who planned the star raiding incident was a high-level official of Florence, at least a high priest or a clan leader. Although you can kill those 6th level mentors by releasing Isaac, how long can Aurora help you hide? What about your clansmen who are still in the hands of the Florentines? Did they tell you the truth, just to let you take revenge like this?" Xenia's excitement actually eased a little, and she stared at Li Ming blankly. "Then, I will never be able to take revenge?" Xenia slowly lowered her head, looking dejected. Li Ming leaned over and crouched, stroking Xenia's little head with his hand, and said, "There is a saying on my home planet, that a gentleman's revenge is never too late after 10 years. If you want to take revenge, the premise is that you must survive first and preserve your strength. If you believe your brother Li Ming, I think it would be better to do this. I will help you capture all the 6th level mentors outside, and let you kill them with your own hands. In this way, you don't have to release Isaac, but you can kill them. The most important thing is that you can also be safe and sound," Li Ming said frankly, and Xenia immediately showed a look of surprise when he said this. "Really? Is it true?" Xenia asked repeatedly. Li Ming smiled and nodded, and said, "Of course it is true, but what?" Xenia asked with some concern, as if she was afraid that something would happen. Li Ming's face was serious, and he said, "But you should not leave this secret realm in the future. The energy here is rich enough for you to use. The people of Florence can't do anything to you." Xenia was a little melancholy when she heard this. After blinking a few times, she suddenly said to herself with some loss, "Then will I live here for the rest of my life?" At this point, Xenia seemed to remember something. She raised her head slightly, looked at Li Ming for a while, and said, "Brother Li Ming, can you really catch all those bad guys outside? Why? Are you still worried about your brother Li Ming's strength?" Li Ming said confidently, and his attitude did not take those 6th level mentors outside into consideration at all. After all, Li Ming is now a 7th level civilization. Xenia is still young, and naturally has no recognition of civilization levels, so she can't understand the meaning of Li Ming's words. "If brother Li Ming is really so powerful, can you rescue Hilly and Hayward?" Xenia said in a pleading tone. "Hillary? Hayward?" Li Ming had never heard of these two people's names, and showed a puzzled expression. "Yes, they are our Fixie people. If they hadn't told me the truth, I wouldn't have known that Thor had surrendered to the Florentines. Now they are still imprisoned by the Florentines, so," Xenia said again, with a pleading expression on her face. Li Ming frowned and hesitated. After all, this was not a trivial matter. Li Ming had to think twice before acting. Li Ming stopped Xenia from releasing Isaac mostly for his own sake. After all, a wild beast with a 7th level strength would not be easy to deal with even for a 7th level civilization. If Isaac was released, everyone in the entire secret realm would suffer. However, it would be much easier to capture the 6th level mentor outside, and it could be said to be effortless. But for Li Ming to return to the military tree of the Florentines again, that was another matter. The 4 high priests were all 7th level civilizations, which Li Ming could not deal with. Moreover, there was also the existence of the patriarch. It would be even more difficult for Li Ming to save people from them. This risk could not be taken. Seeing Li Ming's hesitation, Xenia sighed deeply, lowered her head slowly, and said helplessly, "Okay, then I won't make things difficult for you, brother Li Ming. I'm already very grateful that you can help me catch those people outside." Li Ming glanced at the other party lightly, and was deeply touched by this little girl. This was also the first time that Li Ming had met such a kind and righteous alien since he left the earth. Or maybe the other party was still young and didn't understand the world. From Mars in the solar system to Fuller Star in the Cheyenne system, all the aliens of high-level civilizations were like honeycomb coal, with their whole bodies full of minds, and each of them prioritized their own interests, which also made Li Ming doubly careful before doing anything. Although he wanted to help Xenia in his heart, Li Ming was only a 7th level civilization. How could he compete with the strength of the entire Fuller Star? After some thought, Li Ming also sighed helplessly. "Let's go. I'll help you clean up those people outside first." With that, Li Ming turned and walked outside. Xenia nodded vigorously and followed Li Ming outside. At this time, the fight resumed outside the cave. Clean and Eric stayed close together and whispered, although the induction just now was the breath of a 7th level civilization, this secret realm is full of dangers. Without Xenia, the key, the high priest cannot come in. I think it is most likely the breath of the giant beast Isaac. After all, this wild beast is a 7th level strength. Eric nodded lightly, but still showed a worried look, and said, "But now we have no advantage in fighting with other races. If Li Ming comes out, we may not be able to succeed." Eric's worry is not unreasonable. As 6th level mentors, the number of people is almost the same, and naturally there will be no absolute advantage in strength, which is very tricky. Clean's eyes turned, while being alert to others and thinking, but at this moment, a shout rang in his ears. "Li Ming. It's Li Ming. He's out." And Xenia, Jeremy, a different race, suddenly shouted and looked in the direction of the cave in trance, and this shout immediately attracted the attention of others. At the entrance of the cave, Li Ming and Xenia were indeed walking slowly towards the outside. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129, Accept My Contempt. Seeing this, Clean immediately said, "Let's go first." Before Clean could move, a 2-meter long and wide flying wild beast suddenly blocked his way. This wild beast was round and shaped like a hedgehog, and its body was covered with sharp bone spurs. At the same time, it had a pair of wings that kept flapping and circling in the air. This wild beast was of level 4 strength, and it was the wild beast that Ellis had tamed, the Thorn Feather. The Thorn Feather and the Black Crow Ape were both wild beasts that were trained by the beast taming tribe since childhood, and their consciousness was almost the same as their masters. Although their strength was not as good as that of the mentors of the 6th level civilization, they could assist in battle and harass and fight when fighting alone, and the strength of the Thorn Feather was above the Black Crow Ape. Clean could only stop when blocked by this wild beast, and his angry eyes turned directly to Ellis. Seeing this, Jeremy winked at Hell, then stood up and jumped into the distance, and the posture was exactly running towards Li Ming. Hell had already understood Jeremy's intention, raised his arm, and a dozen black beans appeared in his palm, and he threw them into the distance. Black beans fell from the sky, and once they landed on the ground, they quickly took root and sprouted. Green leaves grew out in the blink of an eye. These leaves were 1 meter long and wide, and looked no different from ordinary leaves, but they were thicker. Each leaf was half a foot thick, and looked a bit like some kind of fruit. The location where Hell threw these beans was exactly blocking the way for others to approach Li Ming. It seemed that there were only a dozen of them, but they grew into a large piece, covering an area of more than 10 meters long and wide. Except for Jeremy, who had already jumped far away, almost everyone else was blocked. Everyone knew the effect of these leaves, and they didn't dare to approach. Hell smiled coldly and whispered, "Violent spider leaves will explode once you get close to them. The power of the spider eggs inside. You should all know it." When the name of violent spider leaves came out, everyone was stunned for a moment, and their faces turned pale. Obviously, everyone knew the power of this plant, and the direction to Li Ming was where Hell had arranged a large piece. Unable to move forward, he could only watch Jeremy approach Li Ming. "Are we going to let Jeremy succeed like this?" Clean gritted his teeth and said, staring at Jeremy helplessly. Not only Clean, but also people of other races could not take a step forward. If they could bypass this violent spider leaf, it was not impossible, but that was not as fast as Jeremy. After 2 quick steps, Jeremy was already more than 10 meters away from Li Ming, with a sinister smile on his lips, but the smile suddenly stopped before it unfolded. Huh. This breath. Jeremy's face stiffened instantly, his eyes widened a little, looking at Li Ming, who was already stunned. The muscles on his face twitched slightly, and his body was shaking constantly. How is it possible? Jeremy's eyes were wide open with fear, as if he had seen something horrible, and drops of sweat instantly flowed from his forehead. Seventh order, civilization. A trembling voice came out of Jeremy's mouth. His whole body seemed to be restrained by something, and could no longer move. Fear had taken over his whole body. Li Ming was calm, and looked down at the other party. His face was gloomy and stern. But the aura of the 7th order civilization in his body had not been fully released. The people in the distance suddenly showed puzzled expressions, and pairs of eyes looked over here curiously. Hell shouted anxiously, "Jeremy, what are you doing? Hurry up and do it." The voice was very loud, filling the entire area. Li Ming in the distance heard it clearly. His eyes turned slightly, looking at Xenia beside him, and whispered, "Let's go." Li Ming said, holding Xenia's hand and walking towards Clean and others. Just after taking 2 steps, Li Ming suddenly stopped, glanced at Jeremy from the corner of his eye, and said coldly, "Why don't you come with me?" When he heard this, Jeremy's body trembled slightly, as if he had been electrocuted, and he quickly bowed his head and followed behind Li Ming, and walked over together. This strange phenomenon made the people in the distance even more puzzled. Fitch of the Beast Tamer clan narrowed his eyes slightly and whispered, "What's wrong with Jeremy?" Clean also showed a strange expression, and glanced at Elite beside him, with a puzzled look on his face. As Li Ming approached little by little, Li Ming's eyes suddenly changed, and he completely released the breath in his body. In an instant, a wave of space fluctuation spread out from Li Ming as the center. Although it was invisible to the naked eye, the consciousness could clearly sense it. This breath fluctuation was like a sharp sword that instantly pierced into everyone's heart. There was no strong pain, but it was full of endless fear. It felt like a hungry lion approaching the crowd. If the other party wanted to attack, it could easily knock down the prey with a slap, without using its sharp teeth. At this time, the nerves were already tense, and the consciousness and body were completely occupied by fear. The only thought in the mind was that as long as they didn't move, they would not be attacked. But the fact was that these people were not only afraid, but also more shocked. A little brother who was just a 5th level civilization had become a big brother of the 7th level civilization in the blink of an eye. Li Ming, what's wrong with you? Clean raised his trembling arm slightly, looked at Li Ming with unbelievable eyes, and said with some stuttering. Li Ming's eyes suddenly turned to look at the other party. "Can you call my name directly?" As soon as the voice fell, Li Ming suddenly raised his arm, and the vines on Jeremy's arm behind him suddenly flew out at a very fast speed, like a beam of light, and arrived in front of Clean in a blink of an eye. Before Clean could react, the vines tightly wrapped around his body, and at the same time, the flower bud's big mouth opened towards Clean's head, as if it could bite off the whole head with just one bite. Clean showed a painful expression. His body was completely bound by the vines, just like being tied up with ropes. Jeremy, who was standing behind Li Ming, shrank even more. He glanced at Li Ming and trembled. Really a 7th level civilization? The slightest bit of luck and doubt in Jeremy's heart disappeared at this moment. The vine was a seed cultivated by an alien race. It quickly formed a vine under the catalysis of energy. The cultivation of the seed was extremely difficult, and one had to add one's own consciousness so that it could be used with ease. Although it was cultivated by consciousness since childhood, it was still forcibly controlled by Li Ming. This is not only the power of a high-level civilization, but also because Li Ming has the foundation of spiritual civilization and biological civilization. This operation is probably difficult for ordinary 7th level civilizations to complete. Naturally, the others also looked at it, showing a look of horror, and did not dare to neglect it in the slightest. Elder, spare my life, I have offended you. I apologize to you. Clean said slowly, while enduring the pain, showing a begging expression. Elders are high-level beings without positions. They exist not only in biological civilization, but also in intelligent civilization and spiritual civilization. Although they are at a high level, they never participate in the political affairs of civilization. They only exist as high-level combat forces, and will not be dispatched easily when it is not necessary. As for Li Ming's 7th level civilization, the title of Elder is naturally well deserved. Li Ming has already detected this information with his wisdom eye ability, but he ignored the other party. Instead, he glanced at the others and said, "Stand together, I have something to ask." After this, these 6th level mentors did not dare to hesitate at all, and quickly stood around Clean's position. Seeing these people obediently, Li Ming smiled slightly, but his expression was stern. "I have no interest in you guys. Your life and death will be decided by Xenia. As for the reason, we have to start from the star raiding incident a few years ago." Li Ming's eyes moved while speaking, and he looked at all these people. When this matter was suddenly mentioned, these 6th level mentors looked at each other and whispered, not knowing why. Jeremy carefully checked the others, and after some thought, he stepped forward and bowed his head, respectfully saying, "Elder, this was done by the Star Raiders Alliance, and has nothing to do with us." This bold question immediately attracted Li Ming's attention, but before Li Ming could speak, Xenia suddenly shouted, "You are talking nonsense. It was obviously you who colluded with the Star Raiders to create that incident." Xenia's angry shout made Jeremy stunned for a moment. Just as he was about to refute, Li Ming suddenly raised his hand, and a black shadow flashed in the sky, and a long thorn shot out at the same time. The long thorn was a bone spur, more than a foot long, as thick as a finger, and it pierced through Jeremy's leg like a bullet. "Ah!" Jeremy screamed in pain, staggered and almost fell to the ground, blood flowing from the place where his leg was pierced. "Elder. I know I was wrong. Please spare my life," Jeremy exclaimed in pain, fearing that he would be killed by Li Ming. The bone spurs came from the 4th level wild beast, Spirit Feather, in the air, but now this wild beast that Ellis had cultivated since childhood has been controlled by Li Ming. This operation is the same as the vines that controlled Jeremy, which is completely overwhelming. Li Ming has also learned the basic abilities of the 4 major races, and any move can easily wipe out these 6th level mentors in front of him. Chapter 130 Absolute Strength. Li Ming's stern eyes were like 2 perspective lights, penetrating all the thoughts of these people in front of him. At this moment, lying or playing some tricks in front of Li Ming was extremely stupid. Li Ming was not interested in interrogating the matter about phase iron. After all, it had nothing to do with Li Ming. The current move was completely to help Xenia. "I won't say any more nonsense, Xenia. How are you going to deal with it?" Li Ming smiled slightly and looked at Xenia beside him. Xenia looked at these people angrily, opened her mouth, and just when she was about to say something, she suddenly paused and swallowed back the words she wanted to say. A complex expression suddenly appeared on her little face. Anger, helplessness, doubts, things that should not be born at this age all appeared in his heart. There seemed to be a bit of confusion in her tangled eyes. She raised her head slightly, looked at Li Ming, and whispered, "Brother Li Ming, can I talk to you alone?" Li Ming felt a little surprised. After nodding slightly, his eyes looked at those 6th level instructors. "All of you turn around." The seemingly gentle voice was like an irresistible order. These 6th level mentors turned around one after another, not daring to breathe. Seeing this, Li Ming pulled Xenia with one hand and walked a few steps away, then squatted down and smiled slightly. "Tell me, what's the matter?" Xenia nodded slightly, glanced at the 6th level mentors, and whispered, "Although I always wanted to kill them before, now that I can kill them, I feel that, even if I kill them, my people will not be resurrected, and killing these people will not help. As you said, the Florence people also have the chief and the high priest. How can I kill them all? Compared to this, I want to be with my people." Xenia spoke slowly word by word, and the entangled heart was completely shown on her face. Li Ming naturally explored the other party's thoughts, but his ability was limited. It was naturally impossible to rescue all the Fixie people. However, looking at Xenia's melancholy eyes, Li Ming felt a little pity. Xenia pursed her lips, reached into her pocket, then flipped it over, and took out the 2 star books. She stared at the star books in her hand, hesitated for a moment, then stretched out her arm, and handed the 2 star books to Li Ming. "You helped me catch these people, but I didn't have the courage to kill them, but I'm still very grateful to you. You have saved my life many times, and I don't know how to thank you. These 2 star books are the most important things in our Fixie tribe. I give them to you as a way to repay your kindness." Xenia said softly, with a serious look and very serious. Xenia's behavior surprised Li Ming a little. He glanced at the 2 star books with his eyes, and his heart was inadvertently a little excited. Synthesis and Alchemy, 2 extremely important star books that Li Ming urgently needs to get. Now they are right in front of him, and they are within his reach. If he says he doesn't want them, it would be a lie, but taking them away like this is a bit like taking advantage of the fire. After all, there are not many people left in the entire Fixie tribe. Li Ming did not take the star book away immediately, but stared at the star book in Xenia's hand with his eyes. As he stared, his wisdom eyes were activated, and the content of one of the star books had entered Li Ming's brain. After just a rough sense, Li Ming immediately withdrew his consciousness, smiled lightly, and said, "These 2 star books can be said to be the treasures of you Fixie people. How can I take them?" As he said so, Li Ming gently pushed Xenia's arm back with his hand. It is absolutely impossible to say that he has no interest, but under the sense just now, the content of one of the synthetic star books has been recorded by Li Ming in a small part. Previously, Li Ming had recorded a complete synthetic star book on the wall of the cave by splitting those red characters. At this time, the contents of the synthetic star book in Xenia's hand and the synthetic star book on the wall met in his mind, and the huge gap immediately appeared. The red letter star book on the cave wall is actually much more advanced than the star book in Xenia's hand. It can be said that there is a world of difference. Although only a small part is compared, it is already very obvious. Li Ming had already learned the advanced star status on the cave wall, so the low-level star status in Xenia's hand was naturally unnecessary. Although he did not accept the star status given by Xenia, Li Ming still wanted to help this little girl. After looking at the 6th-level mentors not far away, Li Ming suddenly had some other ideas. "It's lonely to leave you here alone. Since you don't want to kill these people, why not return them to the Florentines?" Li Ming suddenly stood up and said so. Upon hearing that these people were going to be released, Xenia's face changed slightly, and she seemed a little unwilling, and said, "Just like that? Release them?" Li Ming nodded slightly, but a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he said, "Of course, returning them is not just releasing them for nothing. The Florentines must release some Fixie people in exchange. In this way, you don't have to kill them, and you can also save the people of your own tribe." "Yes. This is a good idea," Xenia shouted happily. It does sound like a good idea, but Li Ming is not completely sure. He is also trying it out. Besides, this plan is also very dangerous. Turning his eyes to those 6th-level mentors, Li Ming suddenly stepped forward, looked at them coldly, and said, "Given the crimes you Florentines have committed, killing you won't make up for the dead Fixie people. Xenia is magnanimous and decided to give you a way out, but whether you can survive depends on you. Or, turn around," Li Ming said lightly, but his tone was like scolding his students. The 7 people slowly turned around and bowed to Li Ming, showing great respect. However, when they heard the way out Li Ming mentioned, they looked at each other in confusion. After thinking for a while, Li Ming said, "There are still many Fixie people imprisoned in your Florence tribe. Now I will use you to exchange for those Fixie people. Whether you live or die depends on your value to Florence." After Li Ming finished speaking, he waved his arm, and the thorn feathers in the sky suddenly flapped their wings and flew over. When they saw the thorn feathers, everyone's face changed, fearing that it would attack again. Among them, Jeremy trembled slightly and used his palm to support his leg that was pierced by the thorn feathers. "You stay where you are for the time being and are not allowed to move a step. I will send you back with Xenia in a little while." Li Ming turned around and came to Xenia's side, leaning over and whispering, "Xenia, let's go to the cave first. I have something to tell you alone." Xenia nodded vigorously without saying a word. Led by Xenia, the 2 walked back into the cave. The remaining 6th-level mentors could only stay where they were. At this time, their minds were already stirring, and various ideas had already sprouted. Seeing Li Ming's figure disappear in the cave, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Fitch stared at the thorn feather in the air, his eyes turned slightly, and looked at Ellis beside him. "Ellis, this thorn feather." Fitch seemed to have some plans, but as soon as he said it, Ellis glanced at him and whispered sternly, "Don't talk. Although I have a common consciousness with the thorn feather, this guy's now completely controlled by other consciousnesses. We can't escape from every move here. If we act rashly, it will be a dead end," Ellis said rigorously. His voice was not loud, but the others standing together heard it clearly. The Li Ming in front of him was not just an ordinary 7th level civilization. Although he could not understand the other party's methods, one thing was very clear, that is, the other party's powerful consciousness had reached a height that did not match his level. Force control of things dominated by other consciousnesses, Jeremy's vines, Ellis's wild beasts, they are all cultivated little by little with consciousness, and their loyalty is far higher than taming wild beasts. This is irreversible in the cognition of the 6th level civilization, but even so, they are still easily controlled by Li Ming, as if they are Li Ming's items. In this case, it is an overwhelming strength. Not to mention resistance. Even the slightest idea of resistance can be known in advance. This is the power of spiritual civilization. Fitch looked at Ellis's terrified eyes and immediately closed his mouth. There is no doubt that Ellis's consciousness at this time is the most clear about the situation of the thorn feather. A 4th level wild beast is not scary, but this wild beast is Li Ming's eyes, so it is better not to act rashly. Fitch and Ellis did not dare to make any move, and the others did not dare to move, so they could only stay where they were. Chapter 131 Products of Advanced Civilization. Inside the cave, Li Ming squatted in front of Xenia with a complicated expression, and said, "I will personally send these people back to the Florence tribe, but it is hard to say whether I can exchange for the return of the Fixie people. After you send us out of the secret realm, wait outside. If I don't come back within a day, then you don't have to wait, just stay in the secret realm," Li Ming said seriously with a serious expression. This trip is indeed dangerous, and Li Ming must make the worst plan. Xenia blinked her eyes, knowing the seriousness of the matter. After hesitating for a while, she stretched out her hand again, and took out the 2 star titles. She looked at the star titles in her palm, and her expression changed for a while, and suddenly looked at Li Ming again. "Brother Li Ming, there are only a few Fixie people left, and the entire tribal civilization may perish. Don't the Florence people want these 2 star titles? As long as we can be exchanged for the Fixie people, I don't need these 2 star titles, and I will give them all to them," Xenia said sincerely, as if she had grown up a lot. Looking at the 2 pieces of star registration, Li Ming frowned slightly, and after thinking for a while, he took the star registration. As Xenia said, this trip to the secret realm was for these 2 pieces of star registration. Even if the few people outside could not exchange them for the Fixie people, there would be no problem. The most important thing is that with these 2 star registrations, Li Ming's safety on this trip would be guaranteed. Li Ming turned his palm and the 2 pieces of star registration were accepted. "Okay, I will do my best in this matter." As he said this, Li Ming had already stood up, and was already planning the details of this trip in his mind. Full preparations would naturally not be redundant. Any possible eventuality must be planned, and a response plan must be reserved. Xenia looked grateful, looked up at Li Ming, and said again, "If Brother Li Ming can bring the Fixie people back, and let our tribe continue, then Brother Li Ming will be the great benefactor of our Fixie tribe. Xenia will definitely remember it in her heart, and repay it in the future." Li Ming smiled slightly, stroked Xenia's little head with his hand, and said nothing more. Just as he was about to do something, Li Ming's eyes turned, and he suddenly looked at the cave wall on the right side of the cave. The cave wall on the right side of the cave was the same as the cave wall on the left side, with white stone slabs and red characters. Li Ming had already studied the cave wall on the left side, which was a superior synthesis star book, but Li Ming had not seen the content on the cave wall on the right side. After watching for a while, Li Ming suddenly narrowed his eyes slightly, his face changed slightly, and he thought to himself, "This is the alchemy star book." Looking carefully, Li Ming took a few steps up, and came to the bottom of the cave wall. This strange move also attracted Xenia's attention, and followed Li Ming to the bottom of the cave wall. These are the words left by advanced civilizations, but with the civilization of our fuller star, we can't understand the content inside. Xenia explained softly, "Advanced civilization? Li Ming lowered his head with interest and glanced at Xenia, seeming to be very interested. Xenia did not hide anything about this. After nodding, she continued to speak frankly. That is an advanced civilization from other galaxies. Because they are all biological civilizations, they left these handwritings to help our biological civilization on Fuller Star develop. Unfortunately, the content is too profound. Even when my father was alive, he could not understand it. Oh. Li Ming's eyes turned, and he looked at the words on the cave wall again. He exclaimed in his heart, it turns out to be a more advanced biological civilization starbook. No wonder it is more powerful than the starbook in Xenia's hand. Thinking of this, Li Ming's eyes narrowed into a line again. The wisdom eye ability has been activated. This kind of advanced starbook must be recorded first, not to mention that it is an extremely rare alchemy starbook. Xenia did not know what Li Ming was doing, but from her expression, she could see that Li Ming seemed to be very interested in the words on the cave wall. After watching for a while, Xenia blinked her eyes, looked up at Li Ming, and asked, Brother Li Ming, can you understand it? Li Ming retracted his consciousness, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. The entire starbook had been recorded by Li Ming, but when he looked at Xenia, Li Ming shook his head slightly and said, how can I understand something of such a high-level civilization? I'm just a little curious. Let's go. I should also leave for the Florence tribe. With that, Li Ming took the lead to walk outside. Accompanied by Xenia, Li Ming walked out of the cave again. The 6th-level mentors were still standing there, motionless. Li Ming glanced at them with disdain and said coldly, let's go, mentors. As he spoke, Li Ming waved his arm, and the vines that were wrapped around Clean slowly loosened and fell off, like a rope falling to the ground, and the other people hurriedly walked towards Li Ming. At this time, these 6th-level mentors had long lost their former prestige. In front of Li Ming, they were like elementary school students around their teachers, quiet and honest, not even daring to breathe. Li Ming and Xenia walked quietly in front, letting the people behind them slowly follow. The road back was peaceful, with no whispers or intrigues. Under the suppression of Li Ming's 7th-level aura, any rash actions disappeared. After passing through the second section of the passage and walking out of the cave, the dense jungle and the smooth dirt road appeared in front of them again. It was the first section of the 3-layer 4-track passage, but at this time, there was a giant wild beast lying beside the cave in trance. It was the black crow ape. Li Ming and Xenia just walked forward without paying any attention, but the people behind them had already noticed the existence of this corpse. Fitch's face suddenly became ugly, and his eyes stared at the black crow ape that had been dead for a long time. He couldn't help but look at Li Ming in front of him. His heart couldn't calm down for a long time. Except for Fitch, the others just glanced at it secretly and didn't dare to make any extra moves. After walking along the dirt road for half a day, the sky was getting a little dark, the sky was about to fall, and the night seemed to be coming soon. The circular teleportation platform had appeared in front of them. Li Ming and Xenia were the first to climb up the steps, followed by the others. However, after these 6th-level mentors climbed up the circular platform, they carefully kept a certain distance from Li Ming and seemed to be very worried and afraid. Li Ming glanced at Xenia beside him, nodded slightly, and did not speak. Xenia understood Li Ming's intention, faced a stone beast, and began to chant a spell. Li Ming could not understand this action before, but after the civilization level was greatly improved, he could sense the clues. This was one of the ways to activate the teleportation array. Most teleportation arrays were manually activated by energy, and this kind of spell was relatively rare. Li Ming's knowledge of teleportation arrays was still relatively small, but he still understood some basic common sense. This kind of spell was generally used in many important places, and it was impossible for ordinary outsiders to crack it, just like an encrypted door. When I didn't understand, I was just curious. Once I understood, Li Ming became even more curious and even wanted to have such a method, but for now, it was just a thought. The stone beast shone with golden light. Under Xenia's urging, the triangular golden light curtain appeared again. The teleportation array had been activated. The light curtain was like a flash in the pan, and the dazzling golden light disappeared in just a flash. When the golden light reappeared, it was already in a cave. Everyone was teleported back to their original place from that secret realm. The cave seemed a little dim at this time, mainly because the passage at the top leading directly to the top of the mountain could no longer see the sky. Li Ming did not rush to walk down the round platform. After looking at Xenia beside him, he whispered, "You wait here. If there is any danger, you can return to the secret realm first. In addition, remember what I told you in the cave." "Well, I know, brother Li Ming." Xenia nodded fiercely and stared at Li Ming, her eyes full of complex colors. Li Ming smiled with satisfaction after hearing this and walked down the steps, leading the mentors of the 4 major races. They walked out of the cave and came to the steps outside. Except for the light of the afternoon sun, nothing else had changed. Li Ming walked down the steps to the bottom of the mountain by himself, and the people behind him followed closely. As he walked, Li Ming's heart had begun to think about something. As far as his inner thoughts were concerned, Li Ming did not want to get involved in this matter. Li Ming's purpose of going to Fuller Star had been achieved, and it was even exceeded. Not only did he get the star flame, but he also got the insect flower fruit. At this time, what Li Ming wanted to do most was to quietly find an opportunity to leave Fuller Star. But when he thought of Xenia's pitiful appearance, Li Ming couldn't help but feel compassion and always wanted to help her. In the end, this idea still defeated reason. As far as this trip was concerned, Li Ming had made the worst plan. If it didn't work, he could still use the star certification in his hand to make a deal. After all, he was now a 7th level civilization and was fully qualified to negotiate. Thinking about various details in his mind, his body had already come to the vicinity of the aircraft. "Let's all get into this aircraft." Li Ming pointed at the aircraft he had taken when he came here and said, and he was already next to the aircraft. This aircraft belonged to the Death Medicine clan. Hearing what Li Ming said, Clean hurriedly stepped forward and opened the hatch. The other people walked in one after another, not daring to make any unnecessary movements. Li Ming boarded the aircraft after everyone entered. These 6th level instructors sat in their seats in an orderly manner without moving. Li Ming glanced at them and sat down gently at a random seat. Chapter 132 Emergency. There was no one in front of the aircraft's control panel. Everyone was sitting quietly in their seats. The cabin was extremely quiet. Li Ming was sitting in a seat behind these people, his eyes slightly closed, and he said nothing. This silence made the other people feel uneasy. They didn't quite understand Li Ming's intention, but they could only tighten their nerves and wait quietly. This feeling was undoubtedly a torment for people's spirit. After a moment, Li Ming's eyes suddenly opened, as if he had made a decision. His expression was serious and his face was heavy. Bang! A strong consciousness emanated from Li Ming, and the aircraft's control panel began to operate automatically. Coordinates and positioning were automatically completed under the operation of Li Ming's consciousness. With a buzzing sound, the spacecraft took off vertically. After rising to a certain height, it whooshed and broke through the air and disappeared into the sky in an instant. The light of the setting sun dyed the sky red. The Fuller Star in the evening was unusually beautiful. The light red light was at the edge of the sky, and under this dim light, a spacecraft was flying slowly. The area below the aircraft was already the Florence tribe. Various towering trees of varying heights appeared in front of Li Ming. Li Ming stopped the aircraft in the air, just like a helicopter staying in the air, except that the aircraft's energy was more stable. It was as if the aircraft was parked in the air. Li Ming stood in front of the control console, and a screen appeared in front of Li Ming. With the operation of consciousness, the light on the screen flickered, and it was already performing some kind of operation autonomously. This screen was the communication device between the aircraft and the ground. After a few flashes, a strange alien face appeared on the screen. "Huh? Who are you?" the alien on the screen said puzzledly when he saw Li Ming's strange face. Li Ming glanced at the other party with contempt, and the screen suddenly fluttered and adjusted the perspective. On the screen in front of the alien, Li Ming's figure appeared first, but as the angle was adjusted, the 6th level mentors of various races appeared on the screen one after another. The alien was just an ordinary 4th level soldier. When he saw the 6th level instructor, he immediately said seriously, "I will arrange the landing immediately. Please wait for a moment, instructors. No, please tell High Priest Lamont to hand over all the Phasey people, otherwise these 6th level instructors will die." Li Ming adjusted the angle again to his face and said coldly, What did you say? The soldier suddenly became nervous, and his expression became nervous. However, Li Ming did not say anything more at this time. He directly closed the communication with his consciousness. The screen flashed and went dark. The soldier sitting in front of the screen saw that the communication on the screen was disconnected and stood up nervously and left the communication room and ran quickly to a room. Captain Corwin, no, it's not good. The nervous soldier shouted with some stammering. The 5th level alien Kerwin, who was sitting in the house, stood up angrily and shouted, why are you panicking? Speak slowly. The soldier seemed unable to control his nervousness. After swallowing hard, he continued, a flying vehicle full of 6th level mentors has arrived above the military tree. There is an alien on board who said he wants to see High Priest Lamont. What? Kerwin suddenly opened his eyes wide and shouted in surprise. Yes, that's right. I just communicated with him. The soldier looked panicked, with a bit of fear in his eyes. Kerwin stared at the soldier and showed hesitation, but a flash of thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Kerwin was suddenly stunned, his face was as hen, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. You mean, the 6th level mentor was abducted by aliens? Colwyn opened his mouth in shock and roared. In a panic, he quickly pressed a button on the table, and said to the soldier, control the aircraft first, I will notify High Priest Lamont immediately. As Colwyn pressed the button, a strange green breath was released from various positions of the military tree. This breath was like a transparent ripple, spreading in a circle like the signal of a signal tower. This was the alarm information of the Florentines. There was no sound, no smell, but it was like an electric current that hit everyone's nerves. As soon as this information was released, the entire military tree entered an emergency state. All equipment and facilities were started, and the 4th level soldiers began to get busy. This military tree looked like an ordinary tree, just huge, but as the alarm sounded, various mechanisms were activated. At this time, Lamont was sitting in front of a screen in a room, and talking to a 6th level Florentine staff member. Magic source system, the Enkeen people have arrived near Arfala planet, and may land on Arfala planet soon. The 6th level mentor said urgently, with a slightly nervous mood. Lamont looked unhappy, but there was a bit of helplessness in his eyes, and whispered, the Enkeen people actually forced their way into Arfala planet. What should we do now? The 6th level mentor showed a bit of helplessness. After Lamont was silent for a while, he sighed for a long time and said, Kenneth, continue to communicate with them, and determine the purpose of their visit this time. 6th level mentor Kenneth immediately replied, I have sent similar requests many times, but the other party has not responded. Lamont's gloomy expression seemed to give rise to a bit of uneasiness. After hesitating for a while, he said, I will report all the information to the clan leader. This matter is of great importance, and must be decided by the clan leaders. Kenneth, you'd better prepare a report, and give it to the clan leader separately. The Enkeen people are powerful. I'm afraid they are not here with good intentions this time. We need to be careful. Yes, High Priest. Kenneth replied. Lamont nodded slightly, and said nothing more, and the video communication was closed. At the same time as the communication was closed, a portal in the room suddenly flashed with light, and a 4th level soldier came in. Report to the High Priest. There is an urgent incident in the alarm room, and Commander Kerwin has initiated a level 1 response. Please personally review the details of the situation. The 4th level soldier saluted first, then handed over an egg-sized meteorite and said so. Lamont hurriedly stood up, his face changed slightly, and a flash of thought suddenly emerged in his mind. Could it be the Enkeen people have arrived? Thinking of this, Lamont raised his hand to take the meteorite. After a slight sense, his expression relaxed slightly, but immediately showed a strange look again. The 6th level mentor was kidnapped. Lamont whispered to himself. His eyes rolled slightly, and he thought about it in confusion, but he couldn't understand it. After thinking about it carefully, you go back first. I'll go to the alarm room right away. Lamont said casually, and didn't seem to care too much. The soldier saluted again, then stepped back, and left the room. At the same time, Li Ming stood quietly in the cockpit of the spacecraft, looking around from the window from time to time, because there were more than a dozen aircraft in the airspace around the aircraft, surrounding the aircraft, where Li Ming was. However, these aircraft did not act rashly, but just surrounded it, and were always alert to the actions of the aircraft, where Li Ming was. These surrounding aircraft were the response of the military tree after the alarm was sounded. Chapter 133 I'm back. Li Ming's expression was calm and composed. He didn't take the flying machines around him into consideration at all. He snorted and slowly moved his head, whispering, "It seems that the value of you guys is not enough to be valued. In this case. No, it won't be," Clean said impulsively, with a worried and fearful look. "That's right. Although we are only 6th level mentors, we have been cultivated by the entire Florence for many years. It is impossible to give up on us," Jeremy said immediately. Li Ming believed this sentence. He continued to look out the window and didn't say anything more. As Jeremy said, the 6th level civilization can be said to be the mainstay of the alien civilization. It plays a connecting role. On Earth, it is like the youth of an era and the future of a nation. Although it doesn't play such an important role in alien civilization, it is also indispensable. Li Ming's eyes paused slightly and stopped looking out the window. Suddenly, he noticed something and immediately looked at the screen in front of him. Under the urging of consciousness, the screen suddenly flashed and a new picture appeared again. However, the face on the screen this time was not the soldier just now, but Lamont. Lamont stared at the screen and Li Ming's familiar face came into view. Lamont showed a look of surprise, feeling a little surprised, and said in a stern voice, "Li Ming, you have returned from the falling rice gate." Seeing Lamont again, Li Ming was no longer nervous and afraid as before. On the contrary, he looked unusually calm. After a slight smile, he said, "Yes, I brought them back as well." While speaking, the angle of the screen turned, and the 6th level instructors behind Li Ming had appeared. Lamont looked calm and there was nothing unusual, but after watching for a while, he seemed to have discovered something. His brows tightened and he said, "What are they doing?" Asking Clean to come forward and talk to me. Li Ming smiled, turned around slowly, and said, "Clean, the high priest wants to talk to you. Why don't you come over?" Clean stood up carefully, bowed to Li Ming, and then cautiously came to the cockpit. He looked at Lamont on the screen, and then at Li Ming, and said hesitantly, "Elder Li, what did I say, Elder?" Lamont on the screen changed his face slightly and said so. Li Ming did not respond, but just glanced at Clean. Clean looked at Lamont on the screen, hesitated for a while, and said, "High Priest, now Li Ming is already a 7th level civilization, so." 7th level civilization? He said this, and there were 10,000 impossible thoughts in his mind, but as a high priest, Lamont did not show it too obviously. He looked at Li Ming through the screen with his eyes, and then looked at Clean. What on earth is going on? Although Lamont didn't believe that Li Ming had entered the 7th level civilization, Clean, who was at the 6th level, was very cautious in front of Li Ming, which was totally out of common sense. How is it possible that he has only been away for half a day and has advanced to levels to become a 7th level civilization? Lamont muttered to himself, thinking that continuous advancement was impossible. Li Ming waved his hand, motioning Clean to retreat. As to whether he was a 7th level civilization, Li Ming didn't need to prove anything to Lamont. At the moment, he just snorted and said, "Lamont, among the Phasey people imprisoned by the Death Medicine clan, there is a man named Hilly and Haywood. If you hand them over to me, I will release Clean and Elliot." Hehe. Lamont narrowed his eyes, chuckled twice, and said, "It seems that you are here for the Phasey people. This is easy. You land the aircraft next to the central tree fort of the military tree, and we will meet to talk." Li Ming showed hesitation. After a little thought, he replied, "Okay, then let's meet and talk." As soon as the voice fell, the communication was directly closed. Li Ming glanced at Clean beside him, motioned him to sit back in his seat, and at the same time, glanced at the other people. "The entire aircraft is under my control. No matter what happens, you'd better stay inside, otherwise, this aircraft will crash directly," Li Ming said sternly. As he spoke, the aircraft was slowly floating under the control of Li Ming's consciousness and flew towards the central tree fort of the military tree. As the aircraft moved, the aircraft around it also gathered around it. At this time in the alarm room, as the communication was interrupted, Lamont slowly stood up from his seat with a look of thinking. As soon as he turned around, 3 figures entered the alarm room from the portal. The people who came were the high priests of the other 3 races. What's going on? Why is the first level alarm activated? As soon as they came in, Norma, who was walking in front, said unhappily. Just as the 4th level soldier was about to speak, Lamont said, "The instructors we sent to the falling rice gate were kidnapped." Norma was shocked when he heard this, but when he saw Lamont, his expression immediately eased and he said, "It turns out that High Priest Lamont is here, so there is nothing to worry about." Norma, the kidnapped 6th level instructors include all the people from our 4 major clans, and it was Li Ming who did it, Lamont said without hesitation. Ha ha ha. Norma laughed several times and said, "Lamont, you are not talking nonsense. A 5th level guy kidnapped a 6th level instructor?" Lamont ignored him, snorted, and said, "What is the specific situation? We can't argue here, so let's go and see what's going on." With that, Lamont walked directly outside. Caden listened in confusion and glanced at Berg beside him. Berg also frowned, looked at Caden and shook his head slightly. Norma turned around, looked at the 2 of them, and said, "Let's go, 2 high priests, let's go and take a look." With that, Norma walked outside, followed by Caden and Berg. In front of the central tree fort of the military tree, a flying machine stopped in the air more than 10 meters above the side of the tree trunk. The hatch of the aircraft slowly opened, and a figure jumped out of the hatch, and the hatch slowly closed at the same time. This person was Li Ming. With a light sound of pop, Li Ming landed steadily on the spacious tree trunk. As soon as he landed, more than a dozen 4th level soldiers surrounded him, but these soldiers were trembling, looking at Li Ming carefully, and did not dare to get too close. At the gate of the tree fort, 4 figures slowly walked out. They were the high priests of the 4 major races. As soon as they walked down the steps, the 4 high priests stopped one after another. Really, a 7th order civilization? Lamont sensed it clearly, and was shocked. He looked at Li Ming with a strange look. Norma also opened his eyes wide, glanced at Lamont, and whispered, "Lamont, what's going on?" Lamont shook his head slightly, staring at Li Ming with his eyes, and his previous confidence had completely disappeared. Li Ming's eyes moved around, and the 4 great priests were all in his eyes. Facing 4 7th order civilizations at once, Li Ming was somewhat nervous, but his expression was still calm, and he said, "The 4 great priests are here. It's just right. Let's talk about the Phasey people." Chapter 134, 1 vs 2. Lamont chuckled twice, looked at the other high priests beside him, and said, "Although I don't know how you reached the 7th level civilization, you want to stand up for the Phasey people with your own strength. Aren't you overestimating your own abilities?" Although Lamont said so, Norma on the side smiled lightly and said, "Lamont, isn't Li Ming from your death medicine clan? Why did he suddenly reach this level? Could it be that you gave the insect flower fruit?" Lamont turned his eyes, glanced at Norma, and said unhappily, "Norma, this man is an outsider. How could I give him the insect flower fruit? Besides, there was another reason for letting him join the death medicine clan. You'd better not think too much. The most important thing right now is to rescue the 6th level mentor first." Lamont looked at Norma coldly, and then turned his gaze to the other 2 high priests, and continued, "Li Ming is now threatening the entire Florence. I advise you to put aside your prejudices and unite, to face the outside world. As for other things, they are our internal affairs in Florence, and we can discuss and solve them later." As soon as these words came out, the other 3 high priests showed their thoughtful expressions. They were really surprised that Li Ming, a freak, suddenly jumped from the 5th level to the 7th level. In addition, there were indeed 6th level mentors of various races trapped on the aircraft in the sky. Judging from the current situation, they should control Li Ming first to rescue the 6th level mentors. However, Li Ming has an inseparable connection with the Death Medicine clan. Whether it is related to the falling rice gate remains to be seen. Just as the three high priests hesitated, Lamont's demeanor became serious, his eyes were stern, and he turned his right hand. Grey light flashed, and a black bone appeared in his hand. This bone was more than 2 feet long, as thick as a wrist, like a match. One end was big and the other end was small. It was a stardust weapon. Li Ming's body moved slightly, and his eyes immediately noticed the black bone. His face changed slightly. Lamont's intention had been seen through by Li Ming, and he immediately said in a stern voice, "Lamont, do you ignore the safety of those 6th level mentors?" Lamont's eyes were fierce, and he had already started to kill. He just glanced at the aircraft in the air, and then turned back to Li Ming, scolding, "Even so, you, a newly advanced 7th level civilization, can't even think of dominating us." As soon as the voice fell, Lamont jumped up, and a black halo suddenly emerged from the black bone in his hand. This halo was very strange, like a ball of fire wrapping the bone, but it was like some kind of smoke when it swayed, and it seemed like an illusion in the haze. Lamont was so anxious to act. Not only Li Ming, but also the other 3 high priests were a little surprised. Li Ming did not dare to neglect it, and he exerted force on his feet, and jumped back directly, but Li Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. The black halo released by the bone had been seen through by Li Ming, and it was the poisonous fog of the Death Medicine clan. Seeing Li Ming dodge, Lamont's eyes narrowed, and he glared at Li Ming. "What? You, who are also from the 7th level civilization, don't dare to make a move." Lamont looked at him fiercely, with an attitude of eagerness to kill Li Ming. Li Ming looked back at him, and his thoughts were already noticed by Li Ming. After nodding slightly, he whispered to himself, "So that's how it is." Lamont was eager to take action, not for anything else, but because Li Ming was an alien life that he had taken into the Death Medicine clan. If Li Ming really caused any trouble, when the clan leader blamed him, he, the high priest, would inevitably be held responsible. So Lamont had to kill Li Ming before the clan leader intervened in the matter. Seeing the other party's thoughts, Li Ming's eyes turned slightly and began to think about countermeasures, but before Li Ming could react, there was a sudden movement in his chest, and Moore stretched lazily and yawned. "Ah, comfortable." Moore stretched his wings with difficulty on Li Ming's chest, and looked around, and found that Li Ming was looking at something with a serious face. "What's wrong? What happened?" Moore poked his head out of Li Ming's chest and glanced lazily, but as soon as Moore opened his eyes, Lamont swung the black bone and hit him. Coo. The black halo expanded rapidly and kept squirming, like a dark cloud trying to swallow Li Ming, but the green halo on Li Ming's palm was not weak at all, and the two squeezed each other when they met. From a distance, it was like incompatible water and fire, rising and falling, suppressing each other. Although it gave people a soft feeling, the impact of the powerful energy made it clear to anyone around. The primary ability of the Light Medicine clan, Light of Redemption. This guy actually used the primary ability of my Light Medicine clan to resist Lamont's advanced ability, Corrosive Magic Mist. Berg, the high priest of the Light Medicine clan, saw the clues, and said in surprise. After all, even as a high priest, he couldn't use low-level abilities to resist the attack of high-level abilities. The voice was not loud, but it was full of shock. Odin and Norma also noticed the difference at the same time. Although they didn't know the abilities of the Light Medicine clan and the Death Medicine clan, they still knew a little common sense. That is, the primary ability could not compete with the high-level ability. Moreover, both of them were still 7th order civilizations, and the energy in their bodies was equal, so there was no suppression in terms of energy volume. Lamont clenched his teeth, looking at the impact of the black light and green light for a while, and then looking at Li Ming. Lamont had already used all the energy in his body, plus the 4th order stardust weapon in his hand. It can be said that few people of the same level could withstand this attack, but when he looked up at Li Ming, the other party was calm and responded easily, as if he did not use all his strength. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, with no extra expression on his face. The primary ability of the Light Medicine clan, Light of Redemption, was naturally extraordinary, after being added by the white ball in his brain. It had already made its mark when it was a 5th order civilization, and now it has advanced to the 7th order. It is even more different now. Looking at Lamont again, he looked exhausted, as if he was still a little overwhelmed. How is it possible? The primary Light Medicine ability actually resisted my advanced ability? Lamont said to himself. His eyes kept looking at Li Ming. His upper and lower teeth were already clenching, and the black bones held in his hands kept pressing against Li Ming. But no matter how hard he tried, Lamont did not have the slightest advantage. If he continued to consume like this, he would naturally not have a chance of winning, and might be suppressed by Li Ming. In front of the other 3 tribes, Lamont would naturally not show weakness easily. Even if it was difficult to deal with it, he had to grit his teeth, but Lamont was unwilling to continue in a stalemate. He turned his eyes slightly, and glanced at the 3 high priests behind him with the corner of his eyes. What are you still looking at? Hurry up and subdue him. Lamont was no longer concerned about too much at this time, and shouted loudly. The 3 high priests who had been watching the battle naturally saw that Li Ming was different, but they just looked at each other, without any intention of taking action immediately. It seemed that they were still waiting for something in each other's eyes. Odin and Norma did not move, and there was still a bit of gloating on their faces. After all, they had been suppressed by Lamont because of the quota for the falling rice gate before, and now they wanted to see Lamont make a fool of himself. But Berg stepped forward and said, I'm curious about this guy's methods. He actually used the abilities of our light medicine clan to this extent. As he said this, Berg jumped into the air, turned his palm, and a yellow-brown wooden spoon appeared in his hand. It was a 4th level stardust weapon. The top of the wooden spoon was larger, like a hammer. At first glance, it was somewhat similar to the black bone in Lamont's hand, but it was wrapped in green light, which looked extremely weird. Li Ming's eyes turned, and his left hand raised. A black halo had emerged. The black halo looked like a flame, similar to the black halo on the black bone in Lamont's hand, but slightly dim. Bang, there was another muffled sound, as if a sledgehammer hit a wall of earth, and a shockwave spread out. Li Ming's left hand caught the wooden spoon, and the black light on his arm and the red light of the wooden spoon collided with each other. What? You actually use the low-level death potion to resist my high-level light potion? Berg's eyes widened a little, revealing an expression of disbelief. It is reasonable to say that Li Ming is proficient in light potion. Li Ming has learned the basic abilities of the 4 major races, and now that Li Ming has reached the 7th level civilization, it is reasonable to master one of the abilities. However, the light potion and death potion abilities are so powerful now, which has exceeded Berg's knowledge of this aspect. Li Ming's expression was still calm. He used the low-level light potion ability with his right hand to catch Lamont's high-level death potion ability, and at the same time, he used the low-level death potion ability with his left hand to resist Berg's high-level light potion ability. Lamont gritted his teeth and showed resentment. While continuing to resist, he glanced at Berg beside him, and Berg also looked exhausted and exchanged glances with Lamont. Both of them tried their best, but still couldn't do anything to Li Ming. The energy confrontation didn't have the slightest advantage. What's wrong with this guy? This is impossible. Berg still couldn't believe what he was dealing with. After looking at Lamont again, he seemed to understand why Lamont had said that they would fight against Li Ming together. Norma in the distance was still watching quietly and didn't seem to care. Instead, he laughed coldly and said, 2 7th level high priests can't do anything to a guy who just advanced. Odin also shook his head lightly and then snorted. After looking at Norma, he said, the most important thing is that the other party countered with a low-level ability. If this gets out, our Florence High Priest will be regarded as a waste by others. Odin's voice was a little louder, as if he was deliberately speaking for Lamont to hear. Lamont heard it clearly, but his expression changed slightly. He glanced behind him, but didn't say a word. Okay, High Priest Odin, stop making sarcastic remarks. I think we should quickly deal with this guy, otherwise Lamont and Berg will suffer, Norma said with a faint smile. Chapter 135, Patriarch. Norma and Odin's words were full of sarcasm and ridicule, and they looked like they were still not satisfied. Odin had also been enduring for a long time under Lamont's oppression, and he would not let go of the opportunity to retaliate. The verbal ridicule was just a verbal dispute, but he also wanted to take this opportunity to show his attitude. I want to see how capable this guy who suddenly appeared is, Odin said viciously, and took 2 steps forward to prepare for action. Norma glanced at Odin, raised her right hand slightly, and blocked Odin's body, saying, if we want to attack, we should attack at the same time. Now they are deadlocked. For you and me, it's a good opportunity. Huh. Odin stopped and looked at Norma. After hearing Norma's words, a flash of thought suddenly flashed through his mind. His face tightened. After taking a quick breath, he whispered, "What do you mean?" Norma smiled sinisterly, shook his head slightly, and said with a strange look in his eyes, "Do it." As soon as the voice fell, Norma jumped up. Odin had already understood his intention, and he jumped up with an evil smile on his face. As soon as the two moved, they immediately attracted Li Ming's attention. He raised his eyes slightly, looked at the actions of the two, and then immediately turned to Lamont and Berg in front of him. These two guys actually. Li Ming had already discovered the intentions of the two. Norma and Odin were actually planning to kill Lamont and Berg at the same time as Li Ming. This made his originally calm expression become ugly. It was already very difficult for Li Ming to deal with the two people in front of him. Even with the bonus of the 6th domain star, it was already close to the limit. Seeing the change in Li Ming's expression, Lamont laughed twice with a sinister look. "Li Ming, you are dead now." While speaking, Lamont glanced behind him and obviously noticed the actions of Odin and Norma. Once these two people made a move, it would be 4-1. Even if Li Ming had the ability to reach the sky, he would not be able to deal with it. It was only a moment. Norma's figure came above the three people. With a wave of his left hand, the cuffs under the cloak made a strange sound of puffing, and then a grey bird flew out from it. These birds were smaller than the palm of a hand, like sparrows, grey in color, and contained powerful energy. As soon as they flew out of their sleeves, they rushed straight towards the three people. There were dozens of them. Odin flipped his right hand, and a purple porcelain bowl appeared in his hand. At the same time, he flipped it again, aiming the mouth of the bowl at the three people below. A green light flashed from the mouth of the bowl, and more than a dozen green buds grew out of it. These green buds quickly became thicker as soon as they stretched out from the mouth of the bowl. When they were about to approach Li Ming, they were already as thick as an arm. The entire growth process was completed in the blink of an eye. What was even more strange was that the vines were full of green fruits the size of eggs. As the birds and vines approached, before Li Ming could react, Lamont suddenly exclaimed, "Not good. Go, Berg." Lamont glanced at Berg beside him, and suddenly pushed hard. Berg also found something wrong, and swung the wooden spoon in his hand vigorously. After the two of them exerted so much force, their bodies quickly retreated, and did not continue to stalemate with Li Ming. Li Ming would not take advantage of the situation to catch up. He turned his hands and retreated 2 steps. At the same time, the birds and vines were approaching. Li Ming suddenly opened his eyes, frowned, and a strong mental force emanated from his brain. The attacking birds and vines paused in the air, as if they had braked suddenly, and then turned around and rushed straight to Lamont and Berg. The two had just consumed a lot of energy. After retreating, they saw the birds and vines rushing towards them before they could even take a breath. "Norma, Odin, you two." Lamont didn't have time to say anything more. He swung the black bone in his hand again, and the black magic mist quickly spread from the top of the bone. The poisonous magic mist instantly wrapped Lamont and Berg together. The birds and vines quickly became listless and lost consciousness when they came into contact with the magic mist. After struggling in the air for a while, they turned over and fell to the ground without any movement. The birds died quickly after being eroded by the poisonous mist, and the vines quickly turned yellow and shriveled like plants that had lost water. After stopping the birds and vines, Lamont breathed a sigh of relief. Berg beside him wiped the sweat from his forehead, looked at Lamont beside him, and whispered, "Luckily you acted in time just now." Lamont nodded slightly, but his eyes changed, and he looked at Norma not far away angrily, saying viciously, "Norma, you actually attacked me and Berg. And you, Odin, what are you two up to?" Lamont's eyes immediately turned back to Odin, gritting his teeth, and wishing to tear the two of them into pieces immediately. Norma and Odin's expressions changed, and they all cast their eyes on Li Ming. At first, the two did intend to get rid of the three people together, but after seeing Lamont and Berg dodge, they changed their minds and prepared to kill Li Ming in one fell swoop. But the birds and vines they controlled suddenly lost control, which made the two confused. Facing Lamont's accusation, the two can be said to have no way to defend themselves. Berg seemed to remember the attack just now. After glancing at Norma and Odin, he said sternly, "I will definitely inform the clan leader of this matter. Let's see what you two have to say in front of the clan leader." Norma was stunned for a moment, and the fear in his heart was all over his face. Looking at Odin beside him, his face was pale, and he was speechless. Li Ming saw all this, raised his head to look at the aircraft in the air, waved his right hand gently, and whispered coldly, "It seems that these 6th level mentors are of no value to you." The voice was not loud, but it resounded in everyone's ears like thunder. The 4 high priests were all nervous, and looked towards Li Ming. Li Ming raised his arm, and waved it downwards, and something strange happened inside the aircraft in the air. There was a buzzing sound, and the whole aircraft trembled slightly. There was a beeping sound in front of the operating table in the cockpit. What's going on?" Clean said nervously, looking around constantly, but at this time the others were also confused. When the buzzing sound stopped, the energy originally released by the aircraft suddenly stopped, as if the entire aircraft's operating switch was suddenly turned off. Without the power provided by energy, the aircraft was just a piece of scrap metal in the air, and could only fall straight to the ground. "The aircraft is going to crash," Jeremy shouted, and several other instructors also made various noises. Some shouted, some exclaimed, but it was useless. The military tree is nearly 1,000 meters above the real ground. Falling from this height will inevitably be shattered. Li Ming's face was serious, and he stood quietly on the spacious tree trunk, and the aircraft fell from the side of the tree trunk. Li Ming knew the consequences of this trip, but he was determined. "I can't help Xenia bring back the Phasey people. I can only kill these people to help Xenia avenge," Li Ming said to himself, looking coldly at the 4 high priests opposite him, and turned his body slightly, preparing to escape from here by force. Lamont looked at the aircraft falling. His face became even uglier, his eyes staring at Li Ming. His mouth opened, and just when he was about to say something, his body suddenly stopped. Lamont didn't say anything, and Li Ming's body, which was about to turn, also stopped, and everyone's eyes looked in a certain direction. Huff huff, the sound of flapping wings was heard, and a huge figure next to the tree trunk was slowly flying up. Li Ming's eyes turned slightly, and he saw a lion-headed bird-body eagle claw beast slowly flying from below to above the tree trunk. This beast is more than 10 meters long and wide, with a head similar to that of a male lion, but a body like that of an eagle. A pair of wings kept flapping, fanning out gusts of strong wind. Most importantly, this beast's claws were holding a flying vehicle. This aircraft was exactly the aircraft that the 6th level mentors were in. Now it was intact under the claws of this beast, and did not fall to the ground. The beast flew for a while and slowly placed the aircraft on the tree trunk in front of Li Ming. At the same time, the beast slowly landed, and stood in front of Li Ming. Upon seeing the beast, Lamont and the other 4 high priests bowed their heads, and did not dare to raise them. A figure slowly stood up on the furry head of the beast. This person's head was like a flower, red and yellow, and his body was straight like a branch. His hands and feet were long green leaves, as soft as willow leaves. It was the chief of the beast tamers, Eluojexiani, who looked at Li Ming with a pair of charming eyes and whispered, "A small alien 7th level civilization wants to kill people on Star. How arrogant." The soft voice revealed a fierce aura. The powerful 8th level civilization had been fully displayed. Li Ming was stunned for a moment and his face turned pale instantly. Although he knew that he might encounter a high level existence, he didn't expect it to happen so soon. Eluojexiani didn't take Li Ming seriously at all. She turned her head slightly and glanced at the 4 high priests behind her. She snorted and said, 4 high priests can't even deal with one guy. Isn't Star looked down upon? Lamont and others hurriedly bowed their heads again, looking trembling, their eyes turning back and forth, and looking at Berg from time to time. After hesitating for a while, he said, "You don't know, Chief. Berg and I were going to subdue this man, but Norma and Odin suddenly attacked Berg and me, so we failed to kill him in time." Huh. Roxanne's beautiful eyes immediately looked at Norma and Odin. Although she didn't say a word, the severity and dissatisfaction in her eyes were already fully revealed. Norma and Odin, their bodies trembled slightly, lowered their heads and said nothing. Beads of sweat as big as beans slowly slid down their foreheads. Even if they wanted to say something at this time, it was too late. Roxanne had no intention of punishing the two for the time being, and her eyes turned back to Li Ming. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Inquina forces its entry. We will deal with the internal affairs of Florence later. Let me subdue this alien first. Luogexiani said unhappily, and looked at Li Ming angrily. She raised her arm slightly, and pointed her willow-like arm at Li Ming. A beam of green light shot out from her palm. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly. How dare he take the attack of the 8th level civilization? He stood up, and jumped back to a distance. The green light was about to fall to the ground, but just as it approached the ground, it suddenly flashed, and the light quickly weakened and disappeared, and then a long wild beast appeared. The wild beast's body was linear, somewhat like a snake, but the surface and head of the wild beast were similar to crocodiles. What was even more strange was that the body of the beast was bent and twisted, like a 7 or 8 meter long rope, and it rushed towards Li Ming again before its body touched the ground. Li Ming was shocked. This 8th level civilization was completely another existence, so he naturally had to be as careful as possible. Of course, confronting an 8th level civilization was not an option for Li Ming. Finding a way to get out was the most important thing at the moment. Looking at the approaching monster snake beast, Li Ming turned his right hand, a white light flashed in his palm, and he slapped the monster snake at the same time. This white light was not a separate ability, but the spiritual energy that Li Ming condensed, and he intended to use it to deal with the violent nature of this wild beast. The white light flashed, like a shining light ball, and the rays of light continued to pierce like sharp swords. The monster snake beast immediately showed a bit of weakness when it saw the white light, and it just turned around in place when it approached Li Ming's body, as if it had encountered something terrible. Luogexiani showed a look of doubt, and her slightly surprised expression was a bit incredible. According to her cognition, a 7th level civilization could not stop the attack of this snake. At this time, Li Ming had a serious face, and felt a bit of effort. There was still a huge difference between the 7th level civilization and the 8th level civilization. Although they belong to the same range, the energy volume will be suppressed. The range of civilization levels is like the division of teenagers, young people, and middle-aged people in humans. The 7th to 9th levels belong to the same range, and the energy is used in the same way, which is several times stronger than the 4th to 6th levels. Li Ming was able to resist, relying entirely on the powerful star of spiritual civilization and wisdom. Luogexiani just felt strange, and could not see much clues. She crossed her eyes, and waved her arm again. A green light shot out. This time the green light was relatively short, hitting the strange snake like a bullet. As soon as the strange snake was hit by the green light, it immediately became energetic, and had already gotten rid of the restraint of Li Ming's white light. At this moment, a violent buzzing sound suddenly came from the sky above his head, and at the same time, several beams of light shone down, completely covering the area below, making the upcoming night suddenly bright. This sudden appearance did not affect the attack of the monster snake. Its long body wrapped around Li Ming like a rope. Li Ming felt his body tighten. His legs and arms were pressed by this force, and he could not move anymore. It was as if a rope had wrapped around Li Ming from his feet to his shoulders, and he could not move at all. After subduing Li Ming, Luogexiani did not show much expression. She was still very serious, and raised her head slightly, to look at the sky. Not only Luogexiani, but also the 4 high priests and Li Ming all looked up at the sky. In the night sky, 3 huge spaceships slowly stopped in place. The beam of light was shining from the spaceship, illuminating the surrounding area. This spaceship was very strange. Its appearance was not the long or round shape of a traditional spaceship, but similar to an ordinary stone, just like an irregular stone we see on the road, or an irregular meteorite in the universe. In short, from the outside, it doesn't look like a spaceship. If it weren't for the light, Li Ming couldn't tell. He looked up and stared at it. Li Ming's expression was a little complicated. Judging from the characteristics of the spaceship, this is definitely not the civilization of Fuller Star. There are 3 spaceships, 1 large and 2 small. The largest is nearly 1,000 meters long and wide, and the smallest is also hundreds of meters long and wide. The spaceship is stationary in the air, and a blue light flashes directly below the hull. This light is circular, and appears at the bottom of the 3 spaceships, and completely covers a certain area. After the blue light is formed, it turns into 3 blue light beams, shining straight on the tree trunks, and then one by one aliens slowly descend from the light beams. The alien that came out of the largest spaceship is the largest, almost as tall as Li Ming. This height is the symbol of the level of civilization. Li Ming frowned immediately after just a slight sense. 9th level. 9th level civilization. Li Ming almost stuttered, and sensing this powerful breath, his body became stiff. This level is almost the top existence of the alien civilization, and it is the pillar of the existence of a civilization. Li Ming had never felt this kind of aura before. His eyes were already stunned while he was looking up, as if he was looking up at a god descending to earth. At this moment, Li Ming's chest began to stir, and a small head stretched out. It was Mer. After taking a look at the existence of the 9th order civilization, Mer directly retracted his head, looking unconcerned. But at this moment, Li Ming was completely unaware of Mer's actions. His body and mind were attracted by the 9th order civilization, and he even forgot about the strange snake beast that bound his body. Luojexiani on the lion-headed beast also lost her previous majesty. She stared at the 9th order civilization in the sky, and her expression gradually returned to normal. She whispered, "The Enkin people are here again." The blue light column was like a transparent elevator. The alien with an oval head narrowed his eyes slightly and glanced at the people below with disdain. His indifferent expression seemed to be looking down at a group of ants. Next to him was an alien with a teardrop-shaped head from the 7th order civilization. It was the Yimi people. In addition, 2 Enkin people from the 8th order civilization came down from the light column on the other 2 small spaceships. 1 9th order, 2 8th order. Even if the entire Fuller Star used all its strength, it would not be able to deal with such an existence. In the face of such absolute strength, the clan leader Luojexiani had to bow her head and salute, not daring to neglect it in the slightest. The military tree fell into unprecedented panic and silence, and everyone looked at the arrival of this high-level alien civilization with trepidation. When its feet landed gently on the ground, it was already between Li Ming and Luojexiani, with its back to Li Ming, looking at Luojexiani on the giant beast, without saying a word. Luojexiani waved her arms quickly, and the giant beast under her turned directly into countless green starlights that drilled into Luojexiani's cloak and disappeared. Inside Luojexiani's cloak, there was a pattern with the same appearance as the giant beast, and it was lifelike. Rogasini fell back to the ground, bent her body, bowed deeply, and whispered, "Greetings to the great mage Imogene." The Inkina named Imogene raised his lifeless eyes slightly, looked at each other with contempt, and then glanced at the 4 high priests in the distance. "I came here across several light years this time for only one thing. If it is done, everyone will live in peace. If it cannot be done, there is no need for your Fuller Star to exist." Imogene said coldly. His words were gentle and light, but the meaning of his words was like thunder and landslide, shaking the heart. It seems that destroying a civilization is just a few simple words. This kind of words is naturally not alarmist. In terms of the ability of high-level civilizations, destroying low-level civilizations is indeed a matter of raising your hands, as simple as crushing ants. Of course, this ability is not a completely personal ability, but a cognitive ability. In other words, if Li Ming wants to destroy the Earth, he only needs to use extremely powerful mental power to detonate the nuclear bomb stored by humans to achieve his goal. The higher the level of civilization, the higher the cognition. This is not only the use of personal energy, but also the use of the energy of the vast universe. Controlling lightning storms and creating earthquakes and volcanoes are all within feasible capabilities. If it does not reach the level of interstellar war, there is no need to use high energy weapons. Luozine was stunned for a moment, and her body shrank slightly. This is a matter of life and death for civilization, so how can we not be careful? We, Fuller Star, will do our best to complete the arrangements made by the Grand Mage. Luozine said respectfully, not even daring to look at the other party. The four high priests in the distance were trembling and shivering, and all the worries and fears in their hearts were shown on their faces. Li Ming shook his head gently and said, "It's not trying our best, it's a must. Youthful Star is a biological civilization, mastering the ability to synthesize and refine pills. I urgently need nebula pill now, and I have prepared the materials. According to the time of your Mang system, I will give you 3 days to prepare and start refining the pill after 3 days." Li Ming said coldly. His words were not only full of urgent needs for this pill, but also threatening. Upon hearing this, Luo Xianyi frowned immediately and looked up at the other party with a worried look on her face. She muttered, "Nebula, Dan. What? A biological civilization that has existed for tens of thousands of years doesn't even have this ability?" Imogene's face turned ugly in an instant, and his eyes widened a little. Chapter 137, Being Smart. Nebula pill? Li Ming muttered to himself, and memories of this pill appeared in his brain. Nebula pill is a pill that can be used by civilizations below level 1, from level 0 to level 9. It has a mild medicinal property and a strong medicinal effect. Its main ability is combat endurance and energy supply. It is the most scarce material in the war of foreign civilizations. Li Ming also learned these cognitions from practicing on the wall of the cave, of course, including the method of refining this pill. Thinking in his mind, his head suddenly lowered and looked at more in his arms. Under the restraint of the strange snake, Li Ming could not move, and Mo was also strangled in the clothes on his chest, and could not move at all. "Damn it, I have never been treated well since I followed you," Mo said with a complaining face. In the distance, Luo Xianyi still bowed her head to Imogen, and several flashes of thoughts flashed through her mind, and her face was still in trouble. After all, synthesis and alchemy are what the Fixie people are best at. Florence naturally can't do it, not to mention that the star registration for synthesis and alchemy has not yet been obtained, which makes it even more difficult. At sunset on the 3rd day, I will give you the materials here. Go back and prepare, Imogen said again, and at the same time, the blue light column above his head fell again, and Imogen's body slowly rose from the light column, as if taking an elevator. After a while, Imogen's figure had completely disappeared and returned to the spacecraft. The light column disappeared, as if a flashlight was suddenly turned off. Watching all this disappear, Luo Xianyi frowned tightly, her face pale and ugly, and she was at a loss for a while. The four high priests in the distance looked at each other. This matter of the survival of civilization can only be decided by the patriarch, but the four people were still full of fear. At this moment, the whole surroundings became silent, as if they could hear each other's heartbeat and breathing. Pa pa pa, the sound of footsteps on the steps came, and at this time, the sound was unusually clear, as if it was right beside my ear. The four high priests turned around and looked at the entrance of the tree fort, only to see an alien walking towards this side from the gate of the tree fort. It was the leader of the Death Medicine clan, Robert. The giant spaceship in the air had been noticed by Robert, and he quickly passed through the area of the four high priests and headed straight for Agosini. The four high priests bowed their heads and saluted, respectfully. Robert walked quickly to Agosini's side, looking flustered, and whispered to Agosini. The content of the conversation was unclear, but from their expressions, it could be seen that the faces of the two people changed, worried, fearful, and gloomy. The alien race leader and the light medicine clan leader have both gone to the Sumu star, and the situation there is also very serious. The current situation is worse for Alpha Star. Agosini glanced at the spaceship in the sky and said worriedly. Robert was also worried. This was a matter of life and death, and it was no joke. He was full of worry. He nodded slightly and said, "Have you got the star record of the falling rice gate? If you have it, you should try it in these 3 days. You can't just sit there and wait for death." After saying this, Luo Xianyi shook her head directly, sighed slightly, and said, "Robert, don't deceive yourself. It takes 100 years to train a master of alchemy. In 3 days, you can't even read all the star records. Then, what should we do?" Robert said nervously, his face full of anxiety. Luo Xianyi was still calm, but she couldn't hide her uneasy mood. After hesitating for a while, she said, "This is not the place to talk. Let's go back to the tree fort to discuss countermeasures." After saying this, Eluozixiani was about to turn around and leave. Just as she was about to turn, her figure suddenly stopped in place, looking at Li Ming with her eyes. "Bring this man in." Roxanne gave an angry order, and two 4th level soldiers immediately approached and grabbed Li Ming, pushing Li Ming towards the tree fort. Robert glanced at Li Ming, not paying much attention, and turned to walk towards the tree fort. A moment later, in the hall inside the tree fort, Roxanne and Robert sat at the table, with 4 high priests standing on both sides. Li Ming was still tied up by the strange snake, and stood in the distance, and there were 7 6th level mentors standing behind him. Roxanne first looked at everyone with her eyes, and then said, "You should have heard what the Enkeen people said just now. If we can't help them refine the nebula pill, our fuller star will inevitably suffer a catastrophe. We only have 3 days to prepare." Fortunately, the Enkeen people don't know our relationship with the Fixie people. Refining pills is not something we Florence people are good at, so in these 3 days, we need to decide what to do next. Roxanne said loudly, and everyone in the room heard it clearly. Li Ming frowned, and felt a sense of foreboding from these words, as if the Seluozini had no intention of preparing to make the elixir. Since she did not intend to make the elixir for the Inkinaya people, then she would either fight or run away. In this case, wouldn't a situation be even more dangerous? Li Ming thought to himself that no matter what the other party planned, Li Ming still had to come up with a plan to escape as soon as possible. While Li Ming was thinking, Eluozini and Robert whispered again. "Robert, with the strength of our fuller star, we absolutely cannot fight the Inkinaya people. If we do, we will be exterminated." Eluozini whispered in a low voice, speaking her mind frankly, and she was not afraid that the low-level disciples around her would hear it. Robert nodded repeatedly. Although he did not say much, he agreed with this matter very much. Ragosini rolled her eyes, and after a while of thinking, she continued, "The gap in strength does not allow us to have any fluke mentality. At present, it seems that the continuation of the race is the top priority. Pack up the valuables, then evacuate, and take as many people as possible to the same star, to hide for a while. There will definitely be losses, but the current situation is serious. We have to put the overall situation first. What do you think?" Ragosini spoke, her eyes stayed on Robert. Robert nodded slightly, completely agreeing with Ragosini's statement. Although he didn't say anything, his mind was already thinking quickly. After all, a large-scale retreat is not as simple as talking. It involves the preparation of spacecraft, personnel arrangement, item classification, etc. And most importantly, there are Enkinya watching in the air. Once the Enkinya know about the escape in advance, it will inevitably fail, and the whole race will be destroyed. Thinking of this, the two lowered their voices again, as if they were discussing something. Although the voice was already very low, Li Ming could still hear it clearly. The two were discussing the details of the escape, but Li Ming showed a strange expression at this moment. Enkanaya sent the 9th level civilization here, and it must be well prepared. Moreover, the cognition of the 9th level civilization is not comparable to that of the lower level civilization. As a lower level civilization, it is basically impossible to guess the thoughts of the higher level civilization. However, after Li Ming cultivated the wisdom eye ability, everything became a little different for him. Although Li Ming did not dare to use the active ability of the wisdom eye to explore the thoughts of the two clan leaders in front of him, there was one thing that Li Ming was still clear about. When doing certain things, the higher level civilization often handled them more carefully and comprehensively than the lower level civilization. Of course, Li Ming was not referring to the two clan leaders in front of him, but the 9th level civilization of Enkanaya. Would an existence at the top of the outer system ignore the possibility of the other party's escape? Obviously not, but the two clan leaders in front of him seemed to have some backup plan, and kept discussing something. Two idiots, running away will only speed up our demise. Damn, I will be implicated. Thinking of this, Li Ming was also worried. He had to find a way to avoid this crisis. After all, Li Ming had just advanced to the 7th level civilization, and didn't want to die here. Just as Li Ming was thinking with a sad face, Eluozixiani and Robert seemed to have reached some results after a simple discussion. Eluozixiani nodded with satisfaction, staring at Robert, and said, "Well, you must take all the things I just mentioned. After all, that is the foundation of our biological civilization on Philistar. In addition to these, Eluozixiani showed a thoughtful expression, still thinking about the items she needed to take to escape from Philistar this time. While thinking, her eyes suddenly looked at Li Ming and stared at Li Ming, as if she suddenly thought of something. Li Ming was stared at by the other party, and he was actually a little chilled, as if something bad was about to happen. Chapter 138, Perish, You. Eluozixiani swept her eyes across Li Ming and all the 6th level mentors behind him, and said coldly, you should be the people who participated in the falling rice gate. Li Ming stood there without saying a word. After the people behind him looked at each other, Clean was the first to stand up, bowed deeply, and said, reporting to the clan leader, it is us. Eluozixiani nodded slightly and continued, then, have you found the star certificate? Clean hesitated after hearing this, and after glancing at Li Ming beside him, he said, the star certificate of the Fenizi people is in the 3rd passage of the secret realm. Only Li Ming and Xenia entered the 3rd passage. We did not enter, so. Eluozixiani heard the meaning of Clean's words. Her eyes turned, looked at Li Ming, and said, did you get the star certificate? Li Ming showed hesitation when he heard this. How to answer? Li Ming still had to be cautious. Although the star certificate was indeed on Li Ming, whether he could use the star certificate to save his life at the moment was another matter, so he had to answer carefully. Seeing that Li Ming did not respond for a long time, Eluozixiani became a little impatient and said sternly, what? Don't you understand what I said? Li Ming hesitated and looked up at the other party. Just when he was about to speak, he suddenly heard a buzzing sound in his ears. The sound was very weak, but refreshing, making people feel an inexplicable vibration. This vibration came from the heart, not from the outside, as if there was a huge energy impacting the body. What's going on? Robert stood up suddenly and looked around, but he could not see anything unusual. Everyone in the room noticed this vibration, but no one knew what happened, so they could only look at each other with confusion. You wait here, Chief Robert and I will go out to see. Eluozixiani then stood up, looked at Robert, and walked straight out. The 2 chiefs walked out of the gate of the tree fort. In addition to the starlight in the night sky, a blue light curtain immediately came into view. Robert frowned and walked quickly to the tree trunk. He looked around with panic and said, could this be? Yes, it's the sensor barrier of the Inquina people. Eluozixiani said with a livid face. The 3 spaceships in the sky have surrounded the military tree from 3 angles. A blue light column is shot out from the bottom of each spaceship. The 3 blue light columns are connected to each other in the form of a light curtain, as if a triangular cover is covering the military tree. And this blue light curtain is a sensor barrier. Any object passing through this barrier will be detected. Under the night sky, the blue light curtain is particularly bright. The soldiers distributed around the military tree began to look around in panic and have activated various emergency mechanisms as if a war is about to come. The residents at the bottom of the tree had fallen asleep, but many residents were awakened by the vibration and walked out of their houses to check around, not knowing why. The other trees around the military tree were also attracted by the situation here. The entire Florence tribe has entered the highest level of state. Roxanne looked up at the giant spaceship, her face full of worry, and she whispered, it seems that it is impossible to escape. Robert was also nervous, and his eyes occasionally looked at Roxanne. As the chief of the tribe, he didn't know what to do for a while. Roxanne saw Robert's in a struggle, turned around and said, go and send out the comfort message first, so as not to cause unnecessary panic. Calm down the entire Florence first. We can't make a mess at this time. By the way, bring the 3 star cloud pills found from the Fixie tribe, and see if we can escape. Roxanne said worriedly. Robert nodded gently, but after looking at the giant spaceship in the sky, he still said, are you going to tell Imogen directly? Roxanne rolled her eyes, looked at Robert, and said, the entire military tree has been blocked. It is meaningless to wait for 3 days. It is better to tell Imogen directly now. With the 3 nebula pills we obtained before, whether we can escape the disaster depends on the situation. You go and arrange your things first. I will talk to Imogen. Remember to bring the 3 nebula pills. I will try my best to convince Imogen. Roxanne continued. Robert nodded helplessly when he heard this. Indeed, this is the only way. Having said that, Robert turned around and walked away quickly. Looking at Robert's figure leaving, Roxanne turned her eyes back to the giant spaceship, narrowed her eyes slightly, raised her left hand, and a green bird flew out from her sleeve. The bird was like a sharp arrow, and it flew out of the sleeve and headed straight for the blue light column under the giant spaceship. The green bird was not a real bird, but a phantom formed by energy. When it touched the blue light column, it turned into a ray of light and merged into it, and then followed the light column into the spaceship. This bird was the information bird containing consciousness energy. As the bird entered, a hatch suddenly opened on the side of the giant spaceship, and then two figures walked out. These two people were Imogen and the 7th level Yumi Starman next to him. The head of the Inkinile people was oval, and the head of the Yumi Starman was like a falling water drop. This unique feature made it easier for people to distinguish. With his own powerful energy, Imogen landed on the tree trunk by flying without the help of any flying equipment. This ability is not uncommon, mainly because of the powerful energy utilization in the body of high-level civilizations. The higher the level, the more essential the utilization of energy is. This is a way of utilization that exceeds the cognition of low-level civilizations. As soon as Imogen landed, Luogasheni stepped forward and bowed deeply. "What? Are you ready so soon?" Imogen didn't care much about the other party's etiquette. He said with a stern look and went straight to the point. Eluozine hesitated for a while, and after thinking it over, she said, "Regarding the matter of refining the nebula pill, please ask the Grand Mage to come to the tree fort to listen to my detailed explanation. The reasons are complicated, and I can't explain them clearly at the moment." Imogen showed a strange look, glanced at the tree fort not far away, snorted, and said, "It's okay to go to the tree fort, but I warn you, I don't want to hear nonsense, and I'm not interested in things that are not related to refining the nebula pill." As he said this, Imogen walked straight towards the tree fort. Eluozine bowed his head slightly on the side, and didn't say anything more, but just kept thinking about how to deal with it with his eyes rolling. After entering the tree fort, Imogen sat down directly at the table. Those 7th level and 6th level civilizations seemed like air. Imogen didn't even look at them. He glanced at Eluozine, as if waiting for her to say something. Roxanne saw what Imogen meant, leaned forward and bowed slowly, then said, "The Great Mage came here for the nebula pill. We have 3 on Philistar, and I have asked someone to get them." Imogen looked calm, half closed his eyes, as if they were closed, and did not move or say a word, as if he had not heard what Roxanne had just said. Roxanne lowered her head slightly, but noticed that the other party had not responded for a long time, and her face froze instantly. After hesitating for a while, she continued, "Regarding the refining of the nebula pill, I will say some things directly. We on Philistar have not yet fully mastered this ability." Imogen's face changed immediately after hearing this, and his eyes widened a little, showing the anger in his eyes. Eluozine was stunned for a moment, then quickly continued, "But we still have 3 nebula pills on Philistar, which can be handed over to you, and we hope you can give us some time. I believe that in the near future, we on Philistar will be proficient in alchemy and synthesis." Humph. Imogen snorted coldly, with an unhappy look on his face. After looking at Eluozine for a while, he said, "In the future? I'm not interested in listening to your nonsense. What is the value of a biological civilization that doesn't even have the ability to refine pills? It seems that it's time for your civilization to disappear." Eluozine suddenly looked up with a horrified expression, and quickly continued, "3 nebula pills are all we have on Philistar, and we do not have the ability to refine pills for the time being. If the Grand Mage needs it, we can provide some healing potions as compensation, as long as you can let us go." Eluozine said bitterly, with a pleading look on her face. There was no trace of the Patriarch's heirs left, but Imogen became even angrier after hearing this, and he slowly stood up. After looking at everyone present again, he said coldly, "Then you will all just die." Chapter 139. I can make pills. Imogen slowly raised his right hand, and a ball of blue ice flame began to condense in his palm. From a distance, it seemed to be just a fist-sized flame, but the color was blue, and it kept rolling and burning. However, if you sensed it carefully, the icy cold air had already penetrated your heart. Li Ming shrank slightly, his face full of fear. If he was hit by this ice flame, he would definitely die. Not only Li Ming, but everyone present who sensed this ice flame was terrified and trembling. Wait. I can refine nebula pill. Li Ming suddenly shouted, his face pale, and he didn't even dare to look at Imogene. Imogene's eyes turned slightly, and finally stopped on Li Ming. His expression eased, and his eyes kept looking at Li Ming. Not only Imogene, but everyone in the room cast their eyes on Li Ming, but their expressions were different. The ice flame on Imogene's palm slowly faded away, but his eyes never left Li Ming's body. Imogene sat back in his seat, his eyes turned to Ragosini, and he still said nothing. Ragosini also glanced at Li Ming and quickly replied, Grand Mage, this person is not from our tribe. His words. Before Ragosini finished speaking, Imogene waved his hand to stop her, and looked at the 7th level civilization Yumi star next to him, and said, Albert, see if what they said is true or false. Yes. The Yumi star named Albert replied immediately, and at the same time moved his body, and walked towards Ragosini first. Li Ming's eyes were still slightly narrowed when he heard this, but Li Ming knew very well that the Yumi star people were a spiritual civilization race that was about to die, and their current existence was completely dependent on the protection of other powerful civilizations. What Imogene said just now clearly meant that Albert was asking him to use his spiritual civilization ability to find out the truth of what Roxanne and Li Ming said. This was also the value of spiritual civilization's survival. Under the gaze of everyone, Albert had already walked in front of Roxanne. Although Albert was only of the 7th level civilization, he glanced at Roxanne, who had the 8th level civilization, with disdain. Then he raised his arm, palm down, and slapped Roxanne's petal-like head. The white light was flowing, and Albert's palm seemed to be releasing an arc to wrap around Roxanne's head. The constantly beating white light was a bit like a nerve line, and the flashing was full of weirdness. Li Ming sensed it very clearly at this time. Albert was using the spiritual civilization's star-level ability to forcibly invade Roxanne's brain. Roxanne frowned and looked painful, but did not dare to resist at all. Although Roxanne did not resist, Albert still looked very strenuous. Obviously, the spiritual literature he used was relatively low level, so it was difficult to operate. Not only that, it also brought a lot of pain to Roxanne. After a while, Albert slowly retracted his palm, then stood there with his eyes slightly closed, as if thinking about something. After a few seconds of pause, Albert turned around, looked at Imogene and nodded. Although he did not speak, he had conveyed some content. Imogene showed a strange look. After looking at Roxanne, he turned to Li Ming, and winked at Albert. Albert turned around, stared at Li Ming, and walked over directly. When he came to Li Ming's side, due to the height difference, Albert snorted with some dissatisfaction, but Li Ming's body was restrained, and he could not squat down, so he had no choice but to lower his head. Facing Li Ming, who lowered his head, Albert barely touched him with his palm. However, as soon as he touched Li Ming's head, Albert's expression suddenly changed. He narrowed his eyes, took a long breath, and then retracted his palm. Albert looked puzzled. He looked at his palm, and then at Li Ming. He seemed to be thinking about something in his puzzled eyes. How come the information I want appears just after my hand touched the other party? Albert's eyes were filled with a bit of surprise. This was something he had never encountered in his career. Albert did not think too much about this strange phenomenon. At the moment, he could not afford to think about it carefully. He turned around and returned to Imogene's side, whispering something in his ear. As Albert spoke, Imogene nodded gently. His eyes kept looking back and forth between Roxanne and Li Ming. After Albert finished his report, Imogene showed a satisfied smile and looked at Li Ming. Li Ming didn't dare to look at Imogene directly, but he could clearly sense the other party's actions. At the same time, Albert's thoughts were completely under Li Ming's control. As for the information Albert had just discovered from Li Ming, it was all Li Ming's intention for him to see. Of course, the other party could not know Li Ming's private information. It was like Li Ming knew what the other party wanted, and then deliberately presented what the other party wanted, which led to the rapid exploration just now. Li Ming had quietly obtained all the information in the other party's brain through the ability of the wisdom eye. Albert, core system, star system, Yumi star. Under the cultivation of the Enkinya star people, he reached the 7th level civilization and served the Enkinya star magic tribe. Now there are only 4 Yimi stars that can be found on Yimi star, the highest 5th level civilization, and most of the people on Yimi star are races from other star systems. The existence of these races on Yimi star ensures the continuation of this only spiritual civilization. Once a gifted and talented Yimi star person is taken away by major forces for cultivation and serves his home star, this is how Albert joined Enkinyat star. This is just preliminary information about Albert. Li Ming did not carefully study more information, but Li Ming also found some information about Enkinyat. Enkinyat is located in the magic source system, star system, an intelligent civilization, and one of the strongest combat forces in the nearby star systems. These star systems are all located in the outer system of the Milky Way and belong to the Orion Arm. The Milky Way is like a round frisbee, or like a dart with gears. There are 4 spiral arms, namely the rhombus arm, the shield Centaurus arm, the Sagittarius arm and the Perseus arm, as well as some unformed small spiral arms. These spiral arms are like huge gears, constantly rotating under the gravitational force of the central matter of the Milky Way. The human solar system is located on the inside of a smaller Orion arm. The Orion arm is between the Sagittarius arm and the Perseus arm. It is an unformed small spiral arm, which contains a large number of star systems and some civilized life. The magic source system is also one of them. In addition to the information obtained from Albert's brain, many new cognitions are constantly emerging after Li Ming advances. Li Ming didn't have time to think too much for the time being. He just learned a little about the information about the Yimi people and the Enkinyat people. His thoughts were turning back and forth in his mind. Not far away, Imogen slowly stood up and walked towards Li Ming step by step. He didn't stop until he was 1 or 2 meters away from Li Ming. He looked at Li Ming carefully with his eyes, curious and excited. When his eyes turned, he saw the strange snake that bound Li Ming. He flicked his fingertips lightly, and a blue light spot the size of a water drop flew out directly. With a light bang, it seemed that something suddenly broke. The blue water drop hit the strange snake directly. With the sound, the whole strange snake that was wrapped around Li Ming broke like glass and scattered all over the ground. Luojixiani saw this move of raising her hand. It really made her feel distressed that the cultivated strange snake was destroyed in a snap of her fingers. At the same time, it also proved the strength of the other party. After all, intelligent civilization belongs to the civilization of combat power. The foundation of civilization development is attack, which is not comparable to biological civilization, not to mention that the other party is a high-ranking 9th level civilization. Chapter 140, Alchemy Master. Imogen gently raised his hand, and a blue light flashed in his palm. A star bag appeared in his hand. He stretched out his arm and handed it to Li Ming, saying, "Here are the materials for refining 3 nebula pills. You just need to synthesize 1 nebula pill. Even a master of alchemy cannot guarantee 100% success. I'll give you 3 chances. That should be enough," Imogen said softly. His words were calm, but gave people a cold feeling. Li Ming bowed his head and carefully took the star bag. Seeing Li Ming accept the materials, Imogen smiled with satisfaction, turned back to the table, and sat down slowly, staring at Li Ming with his eyes, and said, "Let's start." Li Ming looked at the star bag in his hand, and after a slight sense, the contents inside were all presented in his mind. He raised his head slightly, and looked at Imogen, frowning slightly, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. Huh? Imogen showed a questioning look. Li Ming bowed his head quickly and said, "It's not enough to have these materials to make an elixir. We also need the power of the nebula and the equipment for making an elixir." Li Ming paused for a moment and looked at Rogosini again and continued, "I think that, although Fuller Star does not have the ability to make an elixir, it should still have these equipment." Imogen nodded slightly, without saying a word, turned his head slightly, and looked at Rogosini. Rogosini nodded again and quickly replied, "Yes, we have prepared these things a long time ago, just for the needs of making an elixir in the future." Imogen did not say anything, and Albert beside him bowed his head and whispered in his ear again. After listening to Albert's words, Imogen looked at Li Ming and said, "If you need anything, just tell this clan leader and ask her to help you find it. I'll wait here for the result." As soon as this was said, Li Ming and Luojixiani bowed their heads and replied, yes. Luojixiani turned around, looked at Li Ming with a strange look, and said, come with me. Li Ming did not respond, but followed Luojixiani out of the tree fort. After passing through several portals, Li Ming was brought to a spacious house. The room was dozens of meters long and wide, with bright lights and objects of different sizes placed everywhere, like a storage room. Li Ming walked deeper while looking at these objects. According to the records of the alchemy star book that Li Ming learned from the wall of the Fixie secret realm, the refining of the nebula pill requires the power of the nebula tripod, and many alchemy materials. The alchemy materials have been collected, and what Li Ming wants to find is the nebula tripod. Luojixiani slowly followed behind Li Ming, looking at him with doubtful eyes, whispering, do you really know how to make alchemy? Li Ming paused, glanced at Luojixiani behind him with disdain, and continued to look around without replying, looking for the nebula cauldron. There were many items in the room, and it was indeed not easy to find an item, but the items inside made Li Ming feel a little unusual. He couldn't help but snorted and said, the things here are all looted from the Fixie tribe. Luojixiani stared at Li Ming with her charming eyes, without saying a word. Li Ming didn't pay much attention to it. His steps suddenly stopped, and his eyes were fixed on a certain item. Taking 2 steps forward, Li Ming stretched out his right hand, and took the item in his hand. This object was round, the size of a palm, like a large bowl, but Li Ming immediately got information about it. As soon as he sensed it, it was the nebula cauldron. Nebula cauldron? According to the star records on the cave wall, this should be used for alchemy. Li Ming lifted the nebula cauldron and placed it in front of his eyes, carefully examining it. Looking at the object in front of him, another object suddenly appeared in Li Ming's mind, the flowing cloud cauldron. The flowing cloud cauldron was something Li Ming found on the spaceship of the star Aurelius. It was the tribal treasure of the Fixie people. The flowing cloud cauldron and the star records on the cave wall in the Fixie secret realm cave were both relics of the advanced civilization in the past. These two things are extremely important for the synthesis and alchemy of biological civilization. This advanced civilization intended to use this to enhance the ability of Philostar, but did not expect that these two things would lead to the extinction of the Fixie people. Li Ming looked at the nebula cauldron in his hand, his eyes slightly turned, and he thought to himself, so, the flowing cloud cauldron is also used for alchemy. It's just more advanced than the nebula cauldron. Thinking of this, Li Ming showed a thoughtful expression, as if he was in a daze. Luojixiani stood in the distance and waited quietly, with doubts in her eyes. She did not quite believe that Li Ming had the ability to make pills. After Li Ming continued to look at the nebula cauldron in his hand, he turned around and said, I found what I was looking for. Now I can start making pills. Luojixiani showed a look of surprise. It was unclear whether she was happy or worried. She whispered, you really know how to make pills? Li Ming still ignored her, as if she was just air. He found a spacious place, and sat down cross-legged. With his mind focused, and his eyes like torches, the nebula cauldron in his right hand slowly floated up. White light suddenly appeared in the palm of Li Ming's right hand. The light was like a thorn of light that kept entering the nebula cauldron. This was Li Ming injecting energy into the nebula cauldron. With the input of energy, the nebula cauldron began to slowly rotate in the air, like a spinning top, and its size increased as it rotated. After a few seconds, the nebula cauldron had expanded to the size of a football. Li Ming was not in a hurry. He flipped his palm again, and a star bag appeared in his hand. This star bag was the alchemy material that Imogen gave to Li Ming. White light flashed, and 5 things floated out of the star bag. The 5 items were different. Some were similar to fruits, some were similar to the rhizomes of certain plants, and some were similar to certain insect eggs. Li Ming recognized these items, but he did not taste them carefully at the moment. Instead, he put them into the nebula cauldron one by one according to his memory. After all these things disappeared in the nebula cauldron, that was similar to a big bowl, Li Ming's eyes slowly closed, put away the star bag, and slowly raised his hands. A certain memory in the brain was extracted, and at the same time, the white ball of the 6-domain star was immediately integrated into it. His hands began to operate under the command of the brain. Alchemy is not like synthesis. Synthesis is based on the characteristics of the object, using energy to catalyze and stabilize, and then the materials are synthesized in an orderly manner. It seems that it is just crushing and recombining some objects, but it is actually extremely difficult, because the characteristics of each object are different, and the slightest mistake will be wasted. Alchemy is even more difficult. First of all, you need special alchemy equipment. Often, a better alchemy equipment can achieve twice the result with half the effort. Of course, this requires experienced masters. Alchemy equipment is made of special materials. Under the stimulation of energy, it can release high temperature or extreme cold to catalyze materials and extract the essence of materials. Li Ming's hands were like two headlights, rotating back and forth around the nebula cauldron, using energy to stimulate the nebula cauldron. This operation was extremely skillful. His technique and behavior were like that of an alchemy master who had been trained for 100 years. Whether it was the increase or decrease of energy in his hands or the fluctuation of the position of his hands, it was just right. Seeing this scene, Luojiaxian's eyes suddenly widened a little, with a look of shock on her face, and even a little unbelievable. This technique. Even Feliziron back then couldn't do it. Luojiaxian stared at the nebula cauldron, and looked at Li Ming from time to time. In Luojiaxian's memory, alchemy was not as easy as Li Ming showed now. Because in the process of alchemy, the use of techniques and the control of energy on alchemy tools must not have the slightest error. A slight change will lead to the stability of the alchemy tools, vibration, and explosion, which are common. But under Li Ming's hands, the nebula cauldron is smooth and orderly, as stable as Mount Tay. The skilled operation is as easy as eating and drinking water in daily life, and his expression is calm, without any tension. If he is not a master with 100 years of experience, how can he operate like this? The nebula is like a huge ball that keeps turning, and the color keeps changing, sometimes red and sometimes blue, as if the energy inside is constantly being stimulated. After a while, Li Ming's eyes opened slightly, looked at Luojiaxian not far away, and said, "Now we need 5 nebula powers. Just put them in." Luojiaxian was a little surprised, and quickly took out a star bag from her body. Just when she was about to do something, she looked at Li Ming and asked, "Put it in now?" Li Ming nodded lightly, and did not answer. Luojiaxian was relieved. With a push of her hand, the star bag flashed with white light, and 5 objects floated out of it. Under Luojiaxian's control, they slowly fell into the nebula cauldron. It was the power of the 5 nebulae. As the power of the 5 nebulae entered it, the nebula cauldron suddenly shone brightly, as if a spotlight was shot out from the mouth of the bowl, bright and dazzling. Luojiaxian was shocked by this, and her figure was stunned for a moment, but when she looked at Li Ming again, she was still calm, as if she had seen this scene countless times. The light flashed and disappeared, and the big bowl returned to calm. Li Ming stared at the nebula cauldron in front of him, and operated it again with both hands. The power of the nebula is the energy that high-level civilizations must have when fighting alone. It is absorbed by the body and the recovery is extremely slow. But if it is combined with unique materials and refined into a nebula pill, it will have a different effect. The nebula pill can be taken directly. After entering the body, it is like a battery, providing the body with endurance, so there is no need to worry about energy consumption in battle. However, the materials for nebula pill are extremely scarce, and the alchemy masters who need it the most are even fewer, so nebula pill is even more precious and rare. The power of the nebula is an extremely violent energy group. Li Ming experienced it deeply when he advanced on Earth, and even nearly lost his life. The current Li Ming is no longer the same as before, and his cognition is incomparable to ordinary people. Chapter 141 This is the best elixir. Time passed by little. Li Ming didn't remember how long it had been. Maybe it was very short, maybe it was very long. Li Ming had no idea, because all his mind was on the nebula cauldron in front of him. He blinked his eyes slightly, and when they were fully opened, Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief, slowly put his hands down, and the white light gradually disappeared. But the nebula cauldron in front of Li Ming had turned black, and there were several cracks on it. While the nebula cauldron continued to rotate, it became smaller and smaller, and returned to the size of the palm of his hand. Li Ming raised his right hand, palm facing up, and stretched it to the bottom of the nebula cauldron. The nebula cauldron, that had returned to its original size, immediately stopped rotating and slowly fell back into Li Ming's palm. At this time, a layer of black debris appeared in the cauldron, and there was a green bead the size of a fingertip in the debris. The bead was almost transparent as a whole, very bright, and even more abrupt and conspicuous among the debris. Luojixiani also noticed the items in the nebula cauldron, and her eyes widened, and her mouth opened wide. Nebula pill. It has a strong aura and a smooth appearance. It is a top-grade nebula pill. Luojixiani could not stop talking. She was so excited that she even raised her arm, as if she was going to take the pill. Li Ming did not care about her actions. He reached into the nebula cauldron with his left hand and took out the nebula pill. After carefully examining it in front of his eyes, he shook his head slightly. The quality of this nebula cauldron is too poor. Otherwise, this pill should be more perfect. Li Ming muttered this, and there was even a bit of regret on his face. This thing that was already perfect in Luojixiani's eyes still had flaws in Li Ming's eyes. Of course, the reason was not Li Ming's technique, but the quality of this nebula cauldron was insufficient. Luojixiani looked at the nebula pill in Li Ming's hand, while looking at Li Ming excitedly. The majesty of the 8th level civilization had long disappeared, and there was a slight smile on her face. With this nebula pill, our fuller star can be saved. Luojixiani said excitedly, with a look of joy on her face, and her eyes kept staring at Li Ming. Li Ming's mind was still immersed in the nebula pill, but when he heard what Luojixiani said, he immediately paused and looked up at her, his eyes full of disdain. I'm afraid that Chief Luojixiani has misunderstood. This nebula pill was made by me, and I'm not a fuller star person. It seems that this has nothing to do with the survival of your fuller star. Li Ming said lightly, with a look of disdain in his words. Luojixiani heard this, and her smile faded and turned into anger. After all, she was also an 8th level civilization. Li Ming, a 7th level civilization, dared to speak to her like this, but after a slight thought in her mind, the stern look disappeared. At this time, she really couldn't do anything to Li Ming, but Li Ming's implication was to draw a clear line with fuller star, which was not a good thing for fuller star. Luojixiani's face changed several times, and her expression eased a little. She smiled and said, "It was my fault for being rough with you before. If I had known that you had the ability to refine pills, I would never dare to do that to you. You can see that our fuller star is in great trouble this time, and may be exterminated at any time. I know that you have no great connection with our fuller star, and I have offended you before, but I still want to beg you to lend a hand. With your ability, as long as you say a word, the great mage Imogen will definitely not embarrass us." Luojixiani said sincerely, even in a humble manner, as if she had long forgotten her identity as the head of the clan in the 8th level civilization. Li Ming continued to look at the nebula pill in his hand. His eyes moved slightly, and his mind was already thinking about something. Seeing this, Luojixiani seemed to feel that it was possible to achieve it at this time, and hurriedly said again, "As long as you can lend a hand and say a few words for us fuller star, we are willing to offer many benefits." Li Ming still said nothing, and did not even look at the other party, but just looked at the nebula pill in his hand. Luojixiani was a little confused and didn't understand Li Ming's intention, but she continued to say, "As long as you open your mouth, and we have everything on fuller star, we will offer it with both hands." As soon as this sentence came out, Li Ming's eyes turned slightly, looked at Luojixiani, nodded slightly, and said, "If that's the case, then I will try it reluctantly." So saying, Li Ming took the cracked nebula cauldron in one hand and the nebula pill in the other hand, and left the place quickly. Luojixiani was overjoyed to hear this, and didn't dare to stay at all, and hurriedly followed. Back to the tree fort, the figures of Li Ming and Luojixiani immediately attracted everyone's attention, but there were also some changes in the tree fort. The previous Robert was standing carefully somewhere in the hall, and Imogen was sitting at the table holding a half grey and half cyan bead in his hand and watching it. At the same time, there was a small wooden box on the table, and there were two identical beads in the wooden box. After noticing the return of Li Ming and Luojixiani, Imogen didn't care. He looked at the beads in his hand with dissatisfaction on his face. After shaking his head slightly, he whispered, "How dare you take out such a low-quality nebula pill?" As he spoke, He put the beads back into the wooden box. After looking at Robert unhappily, he turned his eyes to Li Ming, smiled slightly, and said, "So soon, the nebula pill has been refined?" Li Ming didn't reply immediately. He bowed and took a few steps forward and put three things on the table. One was a refined nebula pill, a broken nebula cauldron, and a star bag. Because the nebula cauldron here is of poor quality, it was damaged after refining just one, so it can't continue. This is the nebula pill that has just been refined, and there are remaining materials, Li Ming said respectfully. Imogen didn't care, but when he saw the nebula pill that had just been refined, his eyes suddenly changed, showing a bit of surprise, and at the same time, he waved his hand to take the nebula pill in his hand. After a quick look, Imogen's eyes suddenly widened a bit, revealing an expression of disbelief, and looked at Li Ming again. "This is what you just made?" Imogen seemed to be unable to believe it, and said in surprise. Li Ming continued to bow his head and replied, "That's right. Hehe." Imogen looked at the nebula pill in his hand and chuckled, nodding his head. "But, very good." Not only Imogen, but everyone around was immersed in the nebula pill. This superior quality pill was something that many people had never seen before. The most important thing was that this pill was actually made by Li Ming. After all, when Li Ming first arrived at Fuller Star, he was just a foreigner with only a 5th level civilization. In just a short period of time, he not only advanced to the 7th level civilization, but also possessed this master level alchemy ability. How could it not make people look at him with admiration? Imogen clenched his hands with satisfaction, put away the nebula pill, stood up slowly, stared at Li Ming, as if he was looking at a treasure, and said softly, "I just heard Albert say that your name is Li Ming, right?" "Yes. You can follow me in the future. When we return to Inkinaya, I will promote you to the first ice mage." Li Ming bowed his head again and replied, "Thank you, great mage." Inkinaya. Li Ming was not interested. After all, this time, he would become a younger brother working for others just like before. But in the current situation, if Li Ming did not agree, the consequences would be disastrous. On the surface, he smiled, but in his heart he was entangled in all kinds of ways. Imogen nodded with satisfaction, but when he looked at the Fuller people again, his eyes were immediately filled with stern displeasure. "Humph, you guys with the background of biological civilization have seen it. This is the ability that biological civilization should have. I think you should just perish directly," Imogen said coldly. The last sentence seemed light, but to the Fuller people, it was extremely desperate. Everyone was terrified, and their faces turned pale. Luo Jexiani quickly looked at Li Ming, hoping that Li Ming could speak as soon as possible. Li Ming paused first, and without waiting for Imogen to do anything, he hurriedly said, "Grand Mage, there are still some things between my disciple and Fuller Star that have not been dealt with, and my disciple has also received great favors from Fuller Star, so I hope the Grand Mage will let them go." Hearing Li Ming's plea, Imogen chuckled and said, "So that's how it is. Well, let these ants linger on. Even if I don't take action, this kind of powerless biological civilization will be destroyed sooner or later," Imogen said lightly, and at the same time, looked at Li Ming again, his eyes full of joy, as if he was looking at some treasure, and said softly, "I will accept the nebula pill you refined, and the rest of the materials will be left with you first. The 3 defective nebula pills, you can deal with them, but you have to go back to Enkarana Star with me." Li Ming did not move after hearing this. After bowing deeply to Imogen, he showed hesitation, and he didn't know whether he should say the idea in his mind. As they were about to leave Fuller Star, Li Ming still mustered up his courage and said, "Disciple still has some personal matters to take care of on Fuller Star, so it won't take too long. I hope the Grand Mage will agree." Imogen showed a look of surprise and looked at Li Ming again. Chapter 142, Rich Harvest. Imogen did not respond immediately. After glancing at the Philerians around him, he smiled and said, "Since it is your private matter, then deal with it before leaving. There is no need to rush. I will wait for you on the spaceship." After that, Imogen looked at the others with a stern look before leaving the room. Everyone bowed and saluted, not daring to say more until Imogen left completely. With Imogen's departure, everyone's suppressed breath relaxed. Everything was finally safe and sound, and the fuller civilization was preserved. Roxanne and Robert looked at each other, took a deep breath, and looked at Li Ming with completely different eyes. If it were not for Li Ming's words, the entire fuller civilization would probably disappear in the universe. Li Ming still had a stern expression, and looked at Luo Jisheni and said, "Fuller Star has escaped the disaster. Isn't it time to talk about what happened between us?" Luo Jisheni looked back at Li Ming with gratitude, and said with a smile, "Fuller Star was able to escape this disaster thanks to your words. I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of all the people in our tribe. Of course, everything I said before counts. If you have any requests or needs, you can speak frankly." Li Ming nodded with satisfaction after hearing this. After glancing at the others, he said, "I don't ask for much, but I want to talk to the two clan leaders alone about this matter." The others. Before Li Ming finished speaking, Luo Jisheni understood what he meant. She looked at Li Ming with a smile, but her stern eyes swept over the others, and she said sternly, "Why don't you all leave?" The others bowed their heads, and did not dare to say much. They left the room one after another. Soon, only Li Ming and the two clan leaders were left in the room. The 7th Order High Priests and 6th Order Mentors who left the tree fort did not go far, but waited quietly outside the tree fort, either looking at each other, or whispering to each other. Li Ming stayed inside for half a day, and sometimes Robert came out of the tree fort to order a 6th Order Mentor to get something. During this time, Li Ming first asked Luo Jisheni to release all the Fixie people, and arranged for them to return to the Fixie tribe by aircraft. Then he opened his mouth, star nationality, energy, and various items of the 4 major races. Among them, the seeds of the alien race, the beasts and cloaks of the beast tamers, the medicines of the light medicine tribe, the medicines of the dead medicine tribe, etc. All of these items were carefully selected by Li Ming. When Li Ming walked out of the tree fort, he had changed a little. There was an extra cloak on his body. This cloak was the beast tamers, beast cloud clothes. Although it was not a high-end product, it was the best clothes in the beast tamers. This beast cloud habitat is the habitat of the wild beasts. The wild beasts will be embedded in the inside of the cloak in the form of a pattern. From the outside, it is just a pattern, but the inside of the clothes is actually another space, which is drawn with some special materials. In addition to taking a lot of items from the 4 major races, Li Ming also took a look at all the high-level star nationalities of the 4 major races. Although they are called high-level star nationalities, they are also not in Li Ming's eyes for fuller star. However, it is better to have them than not, so he will record them first for emergency use. After taking what he wanted to take, he arranged Fenny's iron to the secret realm where Xenia was. Li Ming stood at the door of the tree fort, looking down at the 7th level high priests and 6th level mentors, snorted coldly, and ran straight to the giant meteorite spaceship. Looking at Li Ming who left, Luo Jisheni and Robert didn't know whether to be happy or worried. Their faces changed several times. They saved the inheritance of civilization, but lost the savings of fuller star for many years. A blue light shot out from the bottom of a giant spaceship. Li Ming entered the blue light and slowly rose like taking an elevator until his figure completely entered the spaceship. As Li Ming entered and disappeared, the 3 meteorite-shaped spaceships suddenly trembled, and the blue barrier light curtain disappeared. Then, tiny arcs began to appear on the surface of the spaceships, like nerves, densely wrapping the entire spaceship. After a few flashes, a muffled bang sounded, and the 3 spaceships disappeared without a trace. The military tree returned to calm, and everything seemed to have never happened. The sky was full of bright stardust. In the space outside fuller star, a space zone suddenly fluctuated, as if transparent water ripples were spreading in the vacuum, and then the white arcs of sizzling jumped, and the 3 meteorite spaceships had appeared. Just a few seconds after appearing, the spaceships rippled and flashed again, and disappeared on the spot again. It was the positioning flight transmission system, first escaping from the gravity of fuller star, then escaping from the gravity of Shi and Mang, leaving the Shi and Mang system, and entering the vacuum outside the star system, and then performing ultra-long distance transmission. Li Ming didn't know the trajectory of the spacecraft. As soon as he entered the spacecraft, he was arranged to a closed room. Although it was closed, there was actually an external observation window in the room, through which Li Ming could watch things in the space outside the spacecraft. In addition, there were some other facilities in the room. These facilities were all made of strange meteorites and contained slight energy, which was completely different from those on Fuller Star. The use and craftsmanship of the facilities were mostly related to the civilization background. Li Ming didn't know much about Inkinaya, and he was also a little curious about these facilities. However, Li Ming knew the ability of this civilization. Inkinaya belonged to an intelligent civilization. Although Li Ming had an intelligent civilization, it was a fruit of wisdom he got from Wilma at the beginning, and there was no memory fragment, which was different from the spiritual civilization and biological civilization he devoured. Li Ming walked around the house and checked different items. In the middle of the house, there was a table-like ornament. It was called a table, but it was actually more like a stone pier, 1 meter high, 2 meters long and wide, and the blue light flashed on the table, which was very strange. On the table under the blue light, there were many items, scattered and fragmented, like some equipment or some decorations, all of which Li Ming had never seen before. Li Ming watched with great interest and stretched out his right hand involuntarily. As soon as his finger touched the blue light, all kinds of information immediately entered Li Ming's mind. The things under the blue light were some identity accessories. In different civilizations, different positions had different accessories, which were symbols of power and status. The items on the table in front of him were the accessories of Inkinaya. First mage of Ice Mage. Ice Mage was a branch civilization of Inkinaya, element tribe. The first mage was a position and title, second only to the Grand Mage. In other words, Li Ming, who was only a 7th level civilization, would be the highest existence except for Imogene. The first mage in Inkinaya was a position that only the 8th level civilization had, and Li Ming, a 7th level, was the same. As for the second mage, it was the position that the 7th level civilization should have. Obviously, Li Ming was greatly valued by Imogene. Li Ming looked at the things on the table and observed them piece by piece. First, there was the badge, which was blue and transparent, in the shape of a round cake, with black metal on the edge, and the object in the middle was like a sapphire, and there were several characters engraved on it. This badge exuded such a powerful energy, and it was unknown what material it was made of. It was strange and peculiar. Li Ming took it in front of his eyes and looked at it carefully. When he got closer, various subtle things were discovered. In addition to the characters, the transparent blue area was also engraved with maps of varying heights, with various high mountains and steep mountains, which were lifelike. Although the badge was only the size of a palm, it seemed like a world under the fine carving, which was wonderful. Li Ming was so devoted to this exquisite item, but he didn't know what was happening in the cockpit of the spacecraft. The cockpit was 100 meters long and wide, and hundreds of Inkinayas were operating in front of a pile of phantom beams, but they all looked nervous, as if something big was about to happen. Imogene stood in front of a 4-meter long and wide table with a serious expression. It was called a table, but it was actually a control panel. On the table, various patterns were drawn with blue light, just like a radar map, but the picture was more vivid than the radar map, and it could clearly show the appearance, speed, name and other information of the object. Grand Mage, we have been locked. A 5th level alien said in a low voice with a pale face, his face full of worry. Imogene's face also looked a little ugly. He looked at the virtual radar map in front of him and saw a beam of light heading straight for his spaceship. How far are we from the magic source system? Imogene said while looking at the radar map. The 5th level alien replied, less than 1 light year. Imogene frowned slightly, with a hesitant expression on his face, as if he was thinking about something, and as if he was making a difficult decision. What is locking us? Have you found out? The 5th level alien did not answer directly. He stretched out his hand to operate the radar, tracing the source of the beam of light, and then enlarged a certain planet pattern, saying, we have locked this area, but we haven't completely checked it out. The situation here is complicated. There are Beast Planet number 13, Prey, Starskimming Camp, Pollock, and Insect Planet number 6, Noble. These 3 planets have the ability to lock and attack us, but we don't know which one it is yet. Imogene nodded lightly, staring at the radar map in front of him, and said sternly, let the left and right wing spacecraft leave first to avoid the shockwave. "What about our spacecraft?" the fifth level alien asked hurriedly. Imogene's solemn expression was a little ugly, and he said word by word, "Prepare to disassemble the spacecraft and evacuate immediately." "Yes," the fifth level alien then replied, turning around and leaving quickly. But just as the fifth level alien took 2 steps, the entire spacecraft suddenly issued an urgent red alarm. This urgent alarm startled all the aliens and they hurried to check the situation. Imogen also looked at the radar map in surprise. "Grand Mage, it's bad. The speed of the attack beam suddenly increased, and it will hit our spaceship in 20 star seconds." Another fifth level alien suddenly stepped forward and shouted, "If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 143. Are you going to wonder? What's going on? Imogen shouted angrily. The fifth level alien trembled and quickly replied, "It was originally expected to hit after 15 minutes, but the attack beam interfered with our Thunder Island and caused a misjudgment, so, idiot. Organize evacuation and escape from the spacecraft immediately." "Immediately," Imogen shouted angrily, and at the same time his eyes turned, as if he thought of something, and turned around and scolded again. "Quick, arrange Li Ming to evacuate, quick." The aliens on the entire spacecraft quickly mobilized, and time became extremely urgent. Looking at the figures of the people around him walking hurriedly, Imogen glanced at Albert beside him and said, "Let's go." As soon as the voice fell, Imogen turned around unwillingly, and walked quickly to somewhere. At this moment, a huge energy beam was approaching the meteorite spacecraft from the depths of distant space. The energy beam was extremely fast, and the vision of low-level civilizations could not capture it at all. It could only rely on advanced civilization equipment to observe it clearly. As the beam approached, the aliens in the spacecraft became more urgent, and all the personnel were busy nervously. At this time, Li Ming was still looking at the badge, but the next moment, a voice suddenly came into Li Ming's ears. It was an alarm message. "Spaceship number 3041 has entered the decomposition state. All rooms are automatically closed. Please be prepared." Li Ming's expression changed slightly. He didn't know why. He looked around. When he saw the window, his expression changed immediately. A ball of light in the distance was shooting towards the spaceship. The light was extremely bright, like a sun, and it was attacking the spaceship at an astonishing speed. "MD, what is this?" Li Ming looked at the window with his eyes widened a little, and his face suddenly became ugly. A buzzing sound was heard, and Li Ming felt that the spaceship he was in was shaking violently, but Li Ming didn't know what happened, but an ominous premonition had already arisen. The huge meteorite-shaped spaceship was shaking in the vacuum of the universe, like an unstable substance, and then cracks appeared on the spaceship, accompanied by white light, just like light shooting out of the crack in the door. The gaps of light were dense, and filled the entire spaceship, as if something was about to radiate from the inside of the spaceship, or as if some kind of violent energy was about to explode from the center of the spaceship. A muffled sound of bang was heard, and the entire spaceship number 3041 was transformed into countless fragments and spread out. These fragments were large and small, with different shapes, but they were all extremely complete, as if each fragment was an independent small spaceship. The dispersion of the fragments was exactly the decomposition mode of this spaceship in response to emergency and dangerous situations. A spaceship was decomposed into thousands of small spaceships, and each independent small spaceship was part of the large spaceship. The room where Li Ming was located was one of them. At the center of the spaceship was a propulsion device. The powerful energy emitted by this device quickly pushed the decomposed hull far away, and thereby protected each cabin from attack. At the moment the spaceship decomposed, the beam of light had also arrived. Although the spaceship had disintegrated, the decomposed small spaceship had not yet flown far. The huge beam of light directly penetrated through the center of the spaceship, and the propulsion device and some decomposition cabins that had not yet left were instantly swallowed up. There was only a flash of light in front of the transparent window, as if something had exploded. Li Ming was about to use his arm to cover his eyes, but the light flashed only for a moment, and then disappeared immediately. the light faded, and a huge amount of energy roared in. The residual energy brought by the impact of the light beam quickly spread around like a tsunami wave. Li Ming only felt that the spacecraft was vibrating violently as never before, and even made a creaking sound, as if the closed cabin spacecraft was about to be shattered. Li Ming's face was pale and his expression was tense. He forced himself to stabilize his figure. In addition to fear, his eyes were full of worry. If the spacecraft was shattered by the shockwave, Li Ming would be dead. This worry was not redundant, because some spacecrafts close to the center of the shockwave were almost instantly turned into powder under the action of this energy. The vibration generated by the shockwave was extremely powerful. Not to mention these spacecrafts, even hard metal celestial bodies could not escape. In addition to the powerful destructive power of the shockwave, it was also the power. Those small spacecrafts were like dust and powder in the explosion. They flew away with a buzzing sound and disappeared at the end of the dark universe in the blink of an eye. The residual power of the shock had not yet faded. His head hurt, his heart and lungs were about to burst, and the pain was unbearable. Li Ming used his energy to stabilize his body and suppress the pain. His forehead was sweating, and his mouth was panting. His eyes were slightly blurry, and the objects he saw seemed to have double images. After an unknown period of time, everything seemed to return to calm. Li Ming shook his head and the things in front of him became clear. He looked carefully and found that the things in the room had not changed much. Outside the window was the dark universe, with occasional bright stardust. As for where he was, Li Ming had no idea. There was no trace of the other decomposition cabins. Everything just happened in an instant, just like a gust of wind suddenly blowing away a piece of sand. There were no bright stars nearby, only faint spots of light in the distance. The blue light curtain in the middle of the house flickered slightly, and its shape changed subtly. Some characters and data had already formed under the weaving of light. The changes on the desktop caught Li Ming's attention. He looked carefully with his eyes and frowned slightly. Control panel? Li Ming whispered to himself and stared at the changes on the desktop. Those characters mean emergency system activated. At the same time, data and information show that this room is an independent small life-saving spacecraft, and it contains a certain amount of energy. The energy is not much, but it is enough to maintain flight for a certain period of time. Of course, the current trajectory of the spacecraft is free, which is completely generated by the power of the impact just now. It does not consume any energy. In addition, there is no gravity here, so the speed of the spacecraft is abnormally fast. On the planet, it will be affected by the gravity of the planet, and flying out of the planet will also be affected by the gravity of the galaxy and stars, but the current spacecraft is not in the star system, and it does not need energy acceleration, and is still in a state of high-speed flight. However, this kind of flight is very dangerous. Once it encounters a wandering planet or other celestial body outside the star system, it will be devastating. Li Ming quickly stepped forward a few steps, stretched out his right hand, and reached into the blue light curtain. We must stop the spacecraft from continuing to fly, Li Ming muttered to himself, and at the same time he had issued several commands with his consciousness. The independent system of the decomposition cabin began to change under Li Ming's operation. The energy slowed down the forward momentum in a reverse push, just like the decomposition cabin of a meteorite constantly erupting various energies, both to reduce the forward momentum and control the direction. Fortunately, this system is advanced enough that it can operate on its own and reach a certain state with just one command. After some operations, the spacecraft slowly regained stability, and the high-speed flight had stopped, as if everything had stopped. Li Ming let out a long sigh of relief and sat down at the table of the control console, his eyes quietly looking out the window. The speed of the spacecraft had slowed down, and there was nothing around except darkness. It can be considered as saving a life. Li Ming muttered to himself and sat down slowly, but there was still some worry in his eyes. His life was temporarily saved, but looking at the endless starry sky, he was already a wandering spacecraft. In the vast universe, if he could not find supplies or a foothold for a long time, he would eventually die. However, this worry also flashed through Li Ming's mind. Energy replenishment was not needed for the time being, because Li Ming absorbed a lot of energy with the star furnace in the Fixie secret realm. plus the energy extorted from Florence, it would be no problem to persist for decades. There is no shortage of energy for the time being, but will it continue to travel like this? Li Ming looked out the window with his eyes a little dull. Alas. After a sigh, Li Ming's mind gradually stabilized. After operating the console for a while, he sat cross-legged on the floor of the house without any behavior. Li Ming had already set up the system. The spacecraft entered the autonomous mode. At this time, the spacecraft will fly on its own and automatically detect habitable planets. At the same time, the spacecraft will automatically avoid celestial bodies that may collide with it to ensure safety. This system is a product of the advanced civilization of Encarnia, so Li Ming can rest assured. With his eyes closed, Li Ming entered a leisurely time. In this situation, Li Ming had nothing to do except waiting quietly. His body was still, but his brain had entered a working state. Because he had reached the 7th level civilization, Li Ming's cognition had increased a lot, and some things that he didn't understand before had become clearer. He was idle anyway, so Li Ming began to slowly develop the information in his brain. In addition to cognition, the first thing Li Ming had to deal with was a 6-domain star wisdom eye of the star. After reaching the 7th level civilization, the learning and cognition of this star had increased dramatically. The 6 Realms Manxing was originally a star book, developed by 6 top spiritual civilization masters from different star systems. However, for some unknown reason, such a powerful star book was divided into 6 and scattered in various corners of the Milky Way. The 6 fragments are named Huan, Hukong, Husheng, Huling, Hushan, and Huming. The common point of the 6 abilities is that they can detect the thoughts of other lives and predict dangers, but with the in-depth cultivation of the star book, different abilities are also revealed. Chapter 144, Crazy Training. Wisdom, mainly with the eyes. This is something Li Ming has already learned. Detecting dangers and understanding thoughts, Li Ming has already mastered it. After reaching the 7th level of civilization, Li Ming's ability has been greatly improved. At the same time, some new abilities have emerged. Li Ming closed his eyes and began to practice according to the method recorded in the star book. With a focused mind and a calm demeanor, his sitting figure is like a well-behaved student. The picture of the star book content that has been deeply rooted in his brain slowly emerges. This is also the difference between the 6-domain Mang star book and other star books. When the star book was created, the 3-eyed humanoid old man injected his consciousness and memory into it and stored the teaching content in the star book with body movements. Li Ming had already absorbed the content when he first opened this star book, but he could only understand part of it. As the level increases, Li Ming will continue to deeply understand more content. Energy utilization, mental concentration, the deeper mysteries of the 6-domain Mang star began to emerge. Li Ming smiled at the corner of his mouth and felt this strange power. An inexplicable feeling spread all over his body. A strand of green hair was released from Li Ming's body. It was called green hair, but its shape and appearance were like green smoke. It was visible to the eyes, but could not be touched. It was the existence of a phantom. The birth of the phantom was the improvement of the ability of the 6-domain Manxing star. Li Ming could already feel it clearly. At the beginning, Ma Hukong's ability existed as a phantom, which made Li Ming envious. Now, in the blink of an eye, Li Ming can also do this. It's just that the phantom emitted is not formed. It is like a burning flame, rolling, expanding, shrinking, and changing constantly. In the early stage of cultivation, the control is relatively unfamiliar, so the situation is normal. Li Ming's eyes slowly opened and deeply felt the phantom around his body. It seemed that it was just a light curtain, but in Li Ming's feeling, this green light phantom was like an extension of the body. The body was still, but the phantom could change with the mind. It was wonderful and strange. This phantom composed of a light curtain was nothing else but a powerful mental force. However, this power is only in its infancy at the moment, and it will take more practice in the future to become proficient. Li Ming smiled with satisfaction and put away the green light phantom. After nodding slightly, he said to himself, "It's really amazing." As he said this, the smile on Li Ming's face faded, and he looked at the operating table with his eyes, and at the same time he looked out the window. Everything was normal, without any changes. Well, anyway, no one will bother me, so why not? Li Ming put away his inner worries and stopped thinking about things related to his situation. This can also adjust his mentality. After all, for Li Ming at the moment, it is like a person floating on the sea in a lonely boat. Even if there is some food and water, the uneasy mentality is the most difficult to overcome. More importantly, unpredictable risks may occur at any time. Li Ming has no worries about food and clothing, and he can shift his mind to other things. This can also help Li Ming overcome psychological difficulties. Whatever he thinks in his mind, his hands also operate. When his right hand flips, a book has appeared in his hand. It is the 6 domain star book. The 6 domain star book is different from the 6 domain Mangsing. The 6 domain star book has the ability to strengthen memory. Li Ming can refine nebula pills and synthesize star glory, which are inseparable from the 6 domain star book. It is this star book that makes Li Ming instantly have the ability of master. However, it is not so easy to practice this star book because the practice of this star book consumes a lot of energy. When Li Ming first practiced it, his energy was instantly sucked dry. Looking at the 6 domain star book in his hand, Li Ming opened the first page. It was a blank page. After staring blankly for a while, Li Ming muttered, "Anyway, there is no shortage of energy. Let's practice first." As he said so, the wisdom eye ability has been activated. This is the uniqueness of the 6 domain star book. Without the ability of the 6 domain star wisdom eye, this book can be said to be just a waste and cannot be read. If not, such a precious thing would not be placed in Elias's cargo hold. With the activation of the wisdom eye, the white fonts appeared again. Just like the last time he practiced, Li Ming's body kept falling. The characters around him were like rays of light drilling into Li Ming's brain, and the bottom of his body seemed to be a bottomless pit, and he could never find the bottom. Once the energy is exhausted, the characters will disappear, and the figure will fall to the ground and stop falling. However, Li Ming was prepared. He took out a star bag and began to restore energy. After the energy was fully restored, he started practicing again, and so on. There are 6 pages in the 6 domain star book. As long as there is no limit to cultivation, Li Ming will keep repeating the operation, absorbing energy, cultivating, absorbing energy, and cultivating. Each time the energy is exhausted, he can only cultivate the content of one line of characters. Time passed little by little, and the energy cycle in the star book and Li Ming's brain. At this time, there is actually no concept of time. There is no day and night, no time, only energy that is constantly consumed and restored. I don't know how long it has been, and a new bottleneck has arrived. A whole page of content has been read by Li Ming, and I don't know how much energy has been consumed. Li Ming can't continue to read the content of the second page, even if he has the ability of wisdom. Li Ming is very clear that this is the limit of the civilization level. In desperation, Li Ming can only stop practicing, but looking back at his brain, the originally white sphere has turned golden at this time, and the shape has turned into a water drop. It is really weird, as if there is a drop of golden water in Li Ming's brain out of thin air. Li Ming didn't care. Since he had cultivated to the top, there was no need to force a breakthrough. He put away the book of the 6 domain star book, and started practicing other star books. Before leaving for a star, Li Ming recorded the highest ability star books of the 4 major races. Now that he had nothing to do, he might as well practice them. Alien species, beast taming, light medicine, death medicine, one after another. Each ability became proficient in Li Ming's mind. Of course, in addition to these, Li Ming also practiced the star books on the wall of the cave in Fei's secret realm from his mind again. In short, all the star books recorded in his mind were practiced to the point where they could not be broken through. There was plenty of time, and Li Ming was not in a hurry. These star books were carefully and seriously practiced repeatedly by Li Ming until he was extremely proficient. If it were normal times, such practice would be boring, but Li Ming was trapped on this spaceship and wandering around. Practicing star books was extremely meaningful to Li Ming. However, although Li Ming had slowed down the speed of practice, these star books were still not enough to make up for the extra time. It might have been a long time, but for Li Ming, he soon felt bored again. The star books that needed to be practiced were already well known, but the spaceship was still wandering, with no village in front, and no shop behind. His eyes widened a little, and he looked at the operating table on the table for a while, and then looked out the window. He was bored and extremely boring. That's right. Li Ming suddenly shouted, as if he suddenly thought of something. With a wave of his arm, a white light flashed from the cuffs of his cloak, and a beam of light shot out from it. The beam fell to the ground, and turned into a white object, which was More lay quietly on the ground with his eyes closed, looking like he was sleeping. Come on, get up and chat. Li Ming glanced at More and then said. More seemed not to hear it, and continued to lie down, ignoring Li Ming at all. Li Ming still looked interested and said, just tell me where your wisdom ability comes from. Although Li Ming was very interested, More lay there motionless, like a corpse. Seeing this scene, Li Ming frowned. If you don't get up and talk, I will use the power of my bloodline. Li Ming looked stern and dissatisfied. More slowly opened one eye, and his eyeballs turned slightly in the direction of Li Ming. After a light hum, he closed his eyes again. Damn it, you don't take me seriously? Li Ming said angrily, and at the same time, he raised his right hand to activate a certain ability, but a thought flashed through his mind, and he put his raised hand down again. Forget it, why bother with a chicken? After a slight sigh, Li Ming muttered to himself, and at the same time, he moved his hand and a star capsule appeared in his hand. There are some items in the star capsule that Li Ming has stored and has not studied. Now that he is free, he might as well take them out and have a look. The star capsule flashed with blue light, and two things flashed out from the beam, one more than a foot long blood red oval, and the other nearly round, the size of an egg, dark and smooth. One of these two things was obtained by Li Ming from the little flame star, and the other was found on Elias's spaceship. Li Ming, a 7th level civilization, was just trying to see what these two things were. However, as soon as these two things appeared, More, who was originally sleeping soundly, suddenly opened his eyes with a shocked expression on his face. Then he stood up, and was as energetic as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Where is it? Where is it? More said while turning his head around, looking around as if he was looking for something. He turned around and finally stopped his eyes on an object in front of Li Ming. Chapter 145, Useless Chicken. Wow. More exclaimed and rushed over. Li Ming was shocked when he saw this. He stretched out his hands and put away the two items in front of him. More's eyes turned, his mouth slightly opened, and his thin little tongue had already stuck out of his mouth. Drops of saliva kept flowing out. He looked at the red thing in Li Ming's arms with his eyes, as if he was looking at something delicious. Such a big insect core? More licked his lips and stared at the red oval object that was more than a foot long. Li Ming stretched out his legs and kicked More several meters away and scolded, hurry up and put away your saliva. More raised his wings, flapped a few times, and ran to Li Ming's side again. He didn't care about the kick just now, and simply wiped off the saliva with his wings. His eyes couldn't help but look at Li Ming. This kind of high-level insect eggs, where did you get them from? More was still talking excitedly, and the saliva in his mouth continued to flow out, and he wiped it with his fleshy wings from time to time. Li Ming looked at the insect eggs in his hand, then at Mer, and understood. He smiled slightly and said, it seems that we can have a good talk now. Mer paused, as if he realized that he was too excited. After a slight adjustment, his expression eased. He coughed twice and said, I think so too. We should really have a good talk. Li Ming held the oval red object in one hand, staring at Mer. After a slight smile, he said, then tell me about the origin of your Hukang ability. Mer was stunned for a moment and hesitated, but when he saw the huge insect eggs, he couldn't help licking his mouth. After coughing again, he showed a serious expression and said, Hukang ability. Hukang ability? Why are you asking this? Do you still want to have this kind of high-level star status? Mer was suddenly startled and looked at Li Ming with wide eyes. Li Ming looked surprised, but soon replied seriously, why? Can't I cultivate this ability? You still have to have dreams. What if they come true? Mer shook his head slightly in disdain, sighed for a long time, and said, I think you should give up this thing. It is now in the hands of the Isaiah people. You are a low. Humph. Before Mer finished speaking, Li Ming snorted unhappily, knowing very well that Mer still looked down on him and despised his low-level biological origin. Of course, with Li Ming's temper, he naturally couldn't spoil the other party. He crossed his arms and said coldly, "You, a chicken, can learn, why can't I?" When he heard the word chicken, Mer was immediately furious, but when he saw the huge insect core in Li Ming's hand, his anger subsided immediately. Okay, I won't argue with you. If you want to hear it, I'll tell you. As for this wisdom ability, we have to start with the Chinese civilization. Chinese civilization is the life in the central star belt of the Milky Way. There is abundant energy here, the life level is higher, and the life physique is more complex. The energy mainly comes from the light energy of the planet itself and the stars. The utilization rate of starlight energy is more widely used. In this starry universe, silicon-based life occupies a dominant position. Silicon-based life is higher than carbon-based life. The so-called carbon-based life can be said to be all living things on Earth. Carbon-based life, including humans, is based on carbon element and relies on oxygen and water on Earth for survival. Of course, except for the Earth, the Shi system, the Gemini system, and the Moyan system, the life forms of these star systems are basically carbon-based life. Silicon-based life forms are far higher than this type of life form. Silicon-based life forms can be stone, crystal, metal, etc. as flesh, and there will be no flesh and blood in the whole body like carbon-based life. The most important thing is that silicon-based life forms are resistant to high temperatures, cold, and have a strong physique. However, this form of life is rare and belongs to a very small number of advanced existences in Chinese civilization. The Hukang ability, that more cultivated, was secretly learned from the Isaya people. Isaya is located in the Tree Star system, multi-star system, which is similar to the Gemini system, but the number of Hengson is greater than that of the Gemini system. And it belongs to silicon-based life. The Tree Star system is located in the center of the Sagittarius spiral arm of the Milky Way, which is still far away from the small Orion arm, where Li Ming is. While telling the above content, Mo recalled the life of advanced civilization, but when he saw Li Ming, he immediately shook his head and said, "You can just listen to these as stories, because you can't get there, and it's even more impossible to win Hukang star status from the powerful Isaya people." Okay, let's not talk about these, let's talk about the insect core in your hand. Mo turned his eyes and looked at the item in Li Ming's hand. This hasty introduction did not elaborate on the true origin of Hukang, but the words clearly revealed the power of the Isaya people. Li Ming had a dazed look in his eyes, as if he was still immersed in the one-sided words that Mo had just said. Silicon-based life forms and advanced civilizations really sounded out of reach. As the lowest carbon-based life form, Li Ming really couldn't understand their existence. Those advanced unknown mysteries were really too far away for Li Ming. It was no wonder that Mo just gave a simple introduction and didn't bother to elaborate. Li Ming's current level was probably that no matter how detailed the other party said, he could only listen to the story. He turned his eyes, retracted his yearning mind, looked at the insect eggs in his hand, smiled faintly, and prepared to throw the giant insect core to Mo, saying, "It's useless for me to keep this thing, so I'll give it to you." Li Ming had already handed over the insect core. Mo ran forward happily, spread his wings, and was about to take it, but before Mo could touch the insect core, Li Ming suddenly withdrew his hand and put the insect core back to his chest. Mo missed and looked up at Li Ming in confusion. "What do you mean? Are you going back on your word?" Li Ming shook his head slightly, chuckled twice, and said, "You and I are inseparable partners. I said I would give this thing to you, and I will definitely give it to you. But before I give it to you, I have something to make clear." Huh? Mo looked puzzled. Li Ming showed a weird smile and continued, "Don't you have the ability to assist in advancement? Does this mean that, in the future, as long as I advance, I only need you?" Mo was shocked, but soon flapped his wings a few times and said, "I do have that ability, but it's not as powerful as you said. My ability to suppress the violence of the nebula force is limited. You will need 8 nebula forces for your next advancement, and I can only suppress the violence of 3 nebula forces, and that's already my limit." Li Ming showed displeasure when he heard this. After glancing at Mo, He muttered softly, "So, your ability is really useless. You can't produce star feathers, and your assisting advancement is so useless. What are you mumbling about?" Moore suddenly yelled. Li Ming quickly smiled, shook his head and replied, "Nothing, nothing." Having said that, Li Ming stretched out his hand and handed over the insect core. "This is yours." Moore chuckled, showing a mouthful of sharp teeth, and happily took the insect core. "Now, I can also evolve." Li Ming looked at Moore's happy expression with disdain, but after hearing his whispers, he was suddenly stunned for a moment and said, "Evolution? What do you mean?" Moore put one hand on the 1-foot-high insect egg, leaned up, and said proudly, "Star beasts can evolve. This requires high-level insect cores to provide the mutant genes needed for evolution. What's so strange about this?" "Oh." Li Ming nodded slightly, without saying anything more, but looked at the other party with other thoughts. Moore flapped his wings and carried the insect core on his shoulder. He walked towards Li Ming and said, "I have some personal matters to deal with. If nothing else, please don't disturb me." As he spoke, Moore carried the insect core and turned into a white light and drilled into Li Ming's cloak. Then a pattern of a little white chicken appeared on Li Ming's cloak. Li Ming touched his chin with one hand, thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. Li Ming didn't know much about the evolution of star beasts, but he didn't care too much. He just felt a little unwilling in his heart. This Moore couldn't give birth to star feathers and couldn't completely assist in the advancement, which made Li Ming regret the blood contract. At this point, regret was useless. His mind turned back and no longer thought about Moore. His eyes looked at another item in his hand. This object was found on Elias' spaceship together with Liu Anding. It was pitch black, light and exquisite, and extremely smooth, like an irregular pebble. Li Ming lifted the object in front of his eyes, stared at it closely, and studied it. Chapter 146. Finally encountered a spaceship. On a slightly larger spaceship, Imogen stood quietly in front of the table in the middle of the room, looking at the light pattern on the table, frowning. "Gale, what is the number of the decomposed spaceship that Li Ming is on?" "It is number 0103. The 5th level civilization alien," Gale quickly replied. Imogen nodded slightly and immediately said, "Send the decomposition information to the undecomposed double-wing spaceship and ask him to find the decomposed spaceship number 0103. Also, contact the headquarters of Encarnia and use all means to investigate this attack and capture the 0103 signal to assist the double-wing in the search." "Yes, Grand Mage." Gale hurriedly saluted and replied seriously. Imogen nodded slowly, without saying anything more, but he was already muttering in his heart, "Such a master of alchemy cannot be lost like this." As the order was issued, the two undecomposed meteorite spaceships began to turn around and fly to the vast universe, and Gale was already urgently contacting the headquarters of Encarnia. In the vast universe, once you leave the star, you will fall into extreme cold and endless darkness, but as long as there is a spaceship to protect you, nothing will happen. Li Ming sat quietly in the cabin, his eyes narrowed, his brows furrowed, looking at the strange black object in his hand. He couldn't help shaking his head. "With my current cognition, I can't tell what this is. It's really strange. Well, keep it for now, and we'll talk about it later." Talking to himself, Li Ming raised his hand and put the object away. Just as he put the object away, the blue light on the table suddenly flashed, and it was the radar that found something. Li Ming hurriedly got up and came to the table, only to see that the radar map showed an object approaching Li Ming. Li Ming pointed with his finger, and the object approaching Li Ming became clear. It was a spaceship. As soon as he saw the spaceship, Li Ming immediately became alert, and his fingers kept moving in the light, trying to contact the other party. In the space not far from Li Ming's cabin, there is indeed a large spaceship. This spaceship is 50 meters long, more than 30 meters high, and is approximately oval in shape. Inside the spaceship, a stone-headed alien from the 7th level civilization is concentrating on the operating table. This person has eyes as big as beans and a wide body. It is Tyran. Tyran is a star raider that Li Ming met in the cruise bay. At that time, Li Ming used the excuse that there was a star flame on the small flame star to trick the other party away and got a chance to escape. It was only later that he was taken to Fuller Star by chance. Boss, this is a decomposition cabin. It is the spaceship of the Insignificant star. It should be decomposed. Tiffany's oval head shook slightly and said so. Oh. Tyron's green bean eye stared at the light radar map, revealing a puzzled look, as if he did not recognize the origin of this cabin ship. Yes, that's right. Tiffany nodded affirmatively and continued, although I have been away from Incanaya for some years, I still recognize the structure of this spaceship. Look at its appearance. One side is smooth and 3 sides are flat. It must have been disassembled. Tiffany said more affirmatively. Matt on the other side smiled and said, Tiffany was once an Incanaya person. If you say it is, then it must be right. Tyron nodded and smiled, saying, the Incanaya spaceship will only start to disassemble when it encounters an irresistible major danger. I wonder if there is anyone in this disassembled cabin? Tyron showed a look of thinking about something else, as if he was thinking of something. Tiffany rolled her eyes and saw through Tyron's thoughts. She chuckled and said, I've looked at it carefully. The exterior structure of this cabin is on the edge of the spacecraft. It is of medium size. It should be an independent cabin on the spacecraft. Even if there are people inside, they should not be from a high-level civilization. Oh. Tyron immediately became interested. After nodding slightly, he glanced at Matt beside him and said, order Troy to contact him and then connect. Yes, boss. Matt responded and quickly turned and left. Watching Matt leave, Tyron showed a sinister smile and said, since the last time I was fooled by that guy called Li Ming, I haven't opened a business. No matter who is in this cabin, he can only blame him for his bad luck this time. Tiffany was also very angry when he heard what Tyron said, and said, it's a pity that the Fuller people took that kid away, otherwise, Li Ming would have suffered a lot. When Li Ming was mentioned, Tyron's green bean eyes widened a little, and he gritted his teeth and said, the Zergons Iao and Star are all there, which almost made me lose my life. This time when we arrive at Parlek Star, we must report this to the Alliance and force Fuller Star to hand over Li Ming. As he said this, Tyron's eyes were full of anger and murderous intent, as if he wanted to kill Li Ming immediately. At this time, Li Ming was still operating on the console, and he showed a look of joy. Finally, we have contacted. Since there is a spaceship passing by, I don't think he will die from wandering. He whispered. Li Ming did not stop, and continued to operate in the blue light, and his eyes did not leave the operating table at all. The blue light continued to splice and transform, and a piece of information was presented. It was Li Ming communicating with the other party. The request Li Ming sent was, toe docking. The so-called toe docking connects the two spacecrafts. Li Ming's spacecraft becomes part of the other spacecraft, but they are not interoperable. It is like a trailer in the human world. If one car breaks down, it is pulled forward by another car. Of course, Li Ming's spacecraft is not damaged. The towing at this moment is just to let the other party lead the way. After sending the request for a while, Li Ming frowned, and new characters appeared on the light. Rejected. Li Ming was puzzled. The other party confirmed that they could dock during the communication just now, but why did they refuse? The blue light flashed again, and a new message flashed out. Li Ming looked carefully and showed a strange expression. This time the message was a request from the other party, interoperable docking. This docking is based on toe docking. Once docked, the two spacecrafts are completely interoperable, and the personnel can meet and enter each other's cabins. Li Ming held his chin with one hand and hesitated. After thinking for a few seconds, he reached out and responded, agreeing to the interconnection and docking. Li Ming had carefully considered the interconnection and docking. Although he could not identify the origin of the other party's spacecraft, with Li Ming's current ability of the 7th level civilization, he was not afraid of anything, not to mention that the other party's spacecraft was not large and was unlikely to be a high-level civilization. As soon as Li Ming agreed, the systems of the two spacecrafts were connected to each other, and the spacecraft and the cabin ship approached each other. Troy, who was standing in front of the operating table, showed a look of joy, turned around and glanced at Matt, and said, tell the boss that the other party has agreed to dock. Matt also smiled, and turned around, and walked away quickly. The two spacecraft continued to approach, and the next operation did not require manual intervention. The systems that connected the spacecrafts were docking little by little. Li Ming's cabin ship was a decomposed spacecraft with almost no ability to fly and less energy reserves, and most of the energy was used to ensure the stability of the cabin or avoid risks. But the advantage was that this type of cabin could release strong signals to facilitate being found. There are 3 docking ports on the 3 planes of the cabin ship. These were originally just doors in the giant spaceship. After being disassembled, they became docking ports, which facilitated rescue. Under the operation of the system, the cabin ship plane was ready, and a pipe slowly extended from the large spaceship of Tyrann. The pipe and the docking port were confirmed after the system was connected, so there would be no accidents. The pipe extended from the large spaceship gently touched the side of Li Ming's cabin, and then the operating table on the desktop made a beeping sound, and several words appeared. After the prompt of docking completed, the cabin door slowly opened, and a passage appeared in front of Li Ming. He glanced inside, and saw that it was only a dozen meters long. At the end was a bright light, which was the docking cabin of the other spaceship. After Li Ming put away a few things on the table, he walked quickly inside along the pipe. Chapter 147, Old Friend. After passing through the pipe, he stepped into the docking cabin. This was an independent small cabin for docking, with an area of only a few square meters. After Li Ming entered the docking cabin, the hatch of the pipe closed automatically, and the docking cabin was equivalent to a completely enclosed space. A few seconds later, a hatch opened in front of the docking cabin, which was the passage leading to the main cabin. Li Ming casually checked it, and continued to walk inside along the passage. As soon as he entered the passage, the hatch closed automatically. At this time, Li Ming had no choice but to continue walking forward, because the hatch behind him was all closed. After walking more than 10 meters along the passage again, bright light appeared again. He walked out of the passage and came to a spacious hall. The hatch behind him closed again. Looking around, the main cabin in front of him was like a private living room, with a spacecraft operating table, several seats, and various personal belongings and pendants everywhere. The light flashed on the operating table. A guy with a stone head sat in front of the operating table, looking at Li Ming coldly, and Tiffany and Matt stood beside him. The one with the stone head was Tyrann. When he looked at Li Ming in front of him, Tyrann was about to say something. His face suddenly froze, and he took a deep breath. His green bean-like eyes widened a little. He stood up from his seat. You are. Tyrann did not say it out loud, and looked at Tiffany beside him. Yes, it's him, Li Ming. Tiffany remembered and shouted directly. Without waiting for Tyrann to say anything, Tiffany took 2 steps forward and said complacently, "What a coincidence. It's not that enemies don't meet. Good boy, you fell into our hands today. I will take your." Halfway through, Tiffany's face suddenly changed, and a strong 7th level civilization aura suddenly filled her, which made her originally arrogant look immediately restrained, and she showed a bit of fear. The trembling body began to slowly retreat, and the astonished eyes and twitching muscles on the face were already speechless. Tiffany looked at Tyrann, and then at Li Ming, not knowing what to say, and stepped back a little bit. Tyrann also showed an unbelievable expression, but his anger did not diminish. He just gritted his teeth, and squeezed out a few words. 7th level civilization. Li Ming stood there quietly for a while. His eyes had already looked at everyone. These people are still clear in Li Ming's memory. Looking at these familiar faces, Li Ming laughed and said, "It turns out that I met an old friend from the cruise bay." After confirming Li Ming's identity, Tyrann looked back and forth at Li Ming, without saying a word, but Tiffany had already trembled and retreated to his side. "Boss, what should we do?" Tiffany said in a low voice with a worried look on her face. HMPH. Tyrann slapped the table with his broad palm, snorted disdainfully, and still looked angry, saying, "The 7th level civilization has only just advanced not long ago. What is there to be afraid of? Little Yangsing almost killed me. Let's make it up today." Tiffany was shocked, and quickly stretched out her hand to stop him, and said quickly, "Boss, you can't do it. This is the interior of the spaceship. It's space. Go away." Tyrann pushed Tiffany away, jumped out from the table, turned one hand into a fist, and smashed towards Li Ming's head. Li Ming looked calm, and all kinds of information had entered Li Ming's mind when he saw the other party for the first time. Facing the other party's oncoming heavy punch, Li Ming raised his right hand and wrapped the other party's fist with his palm. Bang, a violent muffled sound that shook the heart and lungs came out. As soon as the punch and the palm collided, the powerful energy impact spread out, as if two air currents suddenly collided with each other, and the wave instantly filled the entire cabin. The sound of buzz 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 continued to ring, and some decorations and ornaments in the house trembled. Talon used up all his strength, gnashing his teeth, and his small green bean eyes were full of ferocity, but when he saw Li Ming, he was immediately surprised that Li Ming caught his full strength attack easily and calmly. Without waiting for Talon to do anything else, Li Ming narrowed his eyes, swung his left hand, and a ball of yellow powdery substance gushed out. The sudden appearance of powder startled Talon, and he quickly retracted his fist and stepped back several meters away. Talon hurriedly checked his body. Although he was covered with a lot of powder, there was nothing abnormal. What is this? Talon said to himself in confusion, and occasionally raised his hand to pat his body, hoping to get rid of the powder. Li Ming raised his lips and said, "This is the blood-dissolving pollen of the alien race of Philostar. Once it comes into contact with you, it will penetrate your skin and enter your body, and then use your blood as nutrition and your flesh as a vessel to allow the blood-dissolving flower to take root and sprout in your body." Tyrion was stunned for a moment, and his eyes hurriedly checked the pollen on the surface of his body again. After a cursory glance, he smiled lightly and snorted, "I know about this thing, blood-dissolving flower, and you don't have to bluff me. Even the Florentines can't control it easily, let alone an alien like you." Tyrion looked disdainful, as if he was very familiar with this thing. Li Ming knew exactly what Talon was thinking. He smiled, nodded gently, and said, "You are right. This kind of pollen is made of tiny particles. Even the Florentines cannot cultivate it with their consciousness, let alone operate it. But you are lucky to meet me today. I will open your eyes and let you see the beautiful blood-soluble flower." As he said this, Li Ming waved his right hand, and his 5 fingers danced in front of him, as if playing a piano. The 5 fingers glowed with green light, which was wonderful and weird. The green light dancing on the fingertips seemed like some kind of summoning magic. As the palm of his hand squeezed hard, the green light faded and disappeared, but a green bud about an inch long grew on Talon's chest. This green bud grew from the surface of Talon's skin, as if it grew out of fertile soil. The growth speed was visible to the naked eye. The green bud grew little by little, moving along Talon's skin like a creeper, and lying along his chest to his neck. This slight movement was immediately noticed by Talon. He tilted his eyes and saw the green bud growing on his chest. His body shrank back, as if he had received an electric shock. This is. Talon shouted in astonishment. At the same time, he raised his left hand and grabbed the green bud in his hand, intending to pull it out of his body. At this moment, Li Ming suddenly chuckled twice, shook his head slightly, sighed, and said, "It's useless to pull it out. The pollen of the blood-dissolving flower has entered your blood and has spread all over your body. As long as I give an order, the blood-dissolving flower will grow in your body, internal organs, and even your brain. By then, you will have no choice but to die." Li Ming said lightly, with endless pride in his calm tone. Talon's eyes rolled around, his face turned pale in an instant, and the big hand that was tightly holding the green bud slowly loosened at this time. Worry and fear filled his face. "Li Ming, I think. Is there any misunderstanding between us?" Tyrion bowed to Li Ming. His tone had changed greatly. At the critical moment of life and death, he no longer had the boss's airs. Li Ming smiled with satisfaction and walked a few steps forward to the table. Seeing this, Tiffany hurriedly took a few steps and put the chair behind Li Ming. This tactful move made Li Ming notice the other party. As soon as he sat down, he said, "Tiffany, you just said that you wanted to do something to me?" Tiffany shook her head and waved her hands, saying, "Misunderstanding, all misunderstandings." Humph. Li Ming shook his head lightly and ignored the other party. A 6th level civilization, Li Ming could shatter its nebula with a flick of his finger. Such a weak character was not worth Li Ming's attention. He turned his eyes and looked at Tyrion. "Don't worry, the pollen is under my control. Without my instructions, the pollen will not attack. Don't worry," Li Ming said softly, and his eyes were already looking at the blue light on the table. Tyrion let out a long sigh of relief, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and nodded repeatedly to Li Ming. Li Ming didn't even look at him, just stared at the blue light console on the table, while his right hand stretched out and swiped something on the console. Through this console, Li Ming can directly grasp the structural layout, energy reserves, driving direction, and other information of this spacecraft. After a few seconds, Li Ming understood everything, raised his head, and looked at Tyrion. What is Parlik Planet? Chapter 148 Owen? Tyrion looked terrified and glanced at Tiffany, motioning her to answer Li Ming's question. Tiffany's eyes rolled, as if she was thinking about something. Just as she was about to answer, Li Ming suddenly raised his hand to stop her. At this time, Li Ming's attention had shifted to a cabin of the spacecraft. Take me to your cabin and storage compartment. Li Ming stood up and looked at Tiffany. Okay, please follow me. How dare Tiffany hesitate? She quickly answered and walked towards the passage first. Li Ming just followed behind her and said nothing more. Li Ming had already found out about the information about Parlik from Tiffany's brain. Parlik is located on the periphery of the magic source system. The magic source is the name of a star, just like the sun in the solar system, which is just a star. It was named by humans as the sun. The same is true for the magic source of the magic source system, which was named by the Inquina people. Parlik is located at the periphery of the magic source system, and is a dwarf planet. A dwarf planet is a celestial body with planetary mass, but it is neither a planet nor a satellite. Its size is between that of a planet and an asteroid, and it orbits a star. Simply put, it is like Pluto in the solar system. The solar system originally had 9 planets, but later Pluto was removed, leaving only 8 planets, and Pluto is a dwarf planet. There are many such dwarf planets. Parlik, located at the edge of the magic source system, is just one of the dwarf planets orbiting the magic source. It is a concentration camp for star raiders, also known as the Star Raider Camp. Transactions, contacts, cooperation, and information between Star Raiders are all traded or purchased from the Star Raider Camp by various Star Raider organizations or groups. This kind of place can be said to be the darkest place in the interstellar. First of all, the surface environment of this dwarf planet is harsh and life cannot exist. Through advanced civilization technology, it is possible to survive underground on the planet. This also places high demands on the planet, such as gravity, core temperature, harsh surface environment structure, and mass structure of the planet. It is no accident that Parlik can become a Star Raider camp. This is the result of careful selection. All this information was discovered by Li Ming from Tiffany's mind. Of course, there was more detailed information about the planet Parlik, but Li Ming had no intention to learn it carefully for the time being. As he watched Li Ming's figure gradually disappear, Tyrion's face suddenly became ugly. The storage compartment was where the materials that Tyrion had plundered were stored. Now, he, a Star Raider, was being robbed by Li Ming. Li Ming had already learned about the structure of this spaceship through the operating console, including the passages and cabins, but he had no idea whether there were other unknown places inside the spaceship, so he asked Tiffany to lead the way. Following behind him quietly, Li Ming slowly moved forward in the passage. After walking a distance, he came to the top of the passage. There was a metal door at the top of this passage. It was unknown what room it was. On the left side of the top of the passage was an extended passage, which was the direction of the storage compartment. Tiffany did not pause at all. After walking to the end, she turned left and ran to the storage compartment. The walking path was the same as what Li Ming saw from the operating console. Wait. Li Ming suddenly stopped when he came to the top of the passage, looking at the metal door with his eyes, and seemed to have some interest. Tiffany stopped immediately and turned back to Li Ming's side with a respectful face and a smile, and noticed what Li Ming's eyes were looking at. Hey, this used to be a passenger cabin, but later it was changed into a prison cabin by our boss to detain some captured people and sell them to various mines. Tiffany explained quickly. Li Ming had a blank expression on his face and said lightly, "Open it for me to see." Tiffany looked puzzled and a little surprised, but since Li Ming had given the order, he naturally did not dare to hesitate. "Okay, I'll open it for you." He took a few steps forward, slid his palm on the metal door to draw a certain character, and a blue light flashed. The metal door made a buzzing sound, and the white arc on the surface jumped, and then the whole door turned into the void and disappeared. This technology is exactly the ability of the scientific and technological civilization Shixing people, which is completely different from the teleportation portal that Li Ming had seen before. As soon as the door opened, Li Ming took the lead and walked in. The cabin had indeed been changed into a prison cabin. There was a row of rooms on the left and a row of rooms on the right, which went straight to the end. There were more than a dozen small rooms on both sides, just like a prison cell. Li Ming glanced around and walked slowly inside. At this time, the situation in the cells on both sides was taken in by Li Ming. There were aliens imprisoned in each cell. Li Ming did not have any extra plans. He just took a simple look and saw if there was any useful information in the brains of these people. After walking a distance, Li Ming couldn't help but shake his head slightly. Although he searched for some information, it was all about the home planets of these prisoners, and there was nothing Li Ming wanted. Li Ming didn't want to go deeper after only walking halfway. These are some guys wandering in space. We happened to bump into them, so we caught them, Tiffany said with a smile on the side. Li Ming rolled his eyes and glanced at the other party. As the other party said, Li Ming was actually almost a wanderer, but this time it was Terran's bad luck, because he ran into Li Ming. There was nothing to be gained in the prison cabin, so Li Ming turned around and prepared to leave. However, just as he turned around, Li Ming's eyebrows suddenly twitched, and he turned his head back and looked into the depths of the prison cabin, as if he had sensed something. Tiffany noticed Li Ming's strange expression, which made Tiffany stunned for a moment, but she didn't dare to ask more questions, so she could only lean over and wait for Li Ming's instructions. Li Ming, who was originally planning to leave, suddenly changed his mind, turned around, and continued to walk into the depths of the prison cabin until he stopped in front of a cell. He looked into the cell with his eyes, and his face changed slightly. This cell actually held a person who was the same as Li Ming, a human. He looked inside through the gaps between the metal bars, constantly looking at the person imprisoned inside, and it was exactly a human, no difference. Seeing a human in this place, it felt like seeing a relative in another place. Li Ming's face showed a complex expression, and his emotions changed and turned, and he couldn't hold it back for a while. Just as Li Ming was about to do something, he couldn't help but frown slightly and whispered in his heart, "Power civilization? As far as human civilization is concerned, how could there be a power civilization? Besides, the development of mankind is far from reaching the point of traveling in space." Li Ming muttered to himself, and his eyes began to narrow slightly. Seeing this, Tiffany hurried forward and whispered, "This is a guy our boss met when he returned from Xiaoyangsing." "Oh. Hehe." Li Ming's composure suddenly recovered, and he chuckled a few times and nodded. Looking at the motionless guy in the cell, he had recognized him, and couldn't help but say, "Owen, we haven't seen each other for a long time." Chapter 149, Strange Star Altar Stone. Through his wisdom, Li Ming has identified the guy with human appearance, Owen. Owen, like Li Ming, is based on human physique. After swallowing the alien consciousness nebula, he has a civilization higher than that of humans. The difference is that Li Ming is a complete human, because Li Ming's consciousness swallowed the alien consciousness. Owen is different, because Owen's consciousness is occupied by the alien consciousness. Owen, who is in the cage, shook his body and slowly raised his head. Li Ming's face has entered his sight. At first, he didn't care, but after looking carefully for a few seconds, his eyes immediately widened a little, and he let out a soft cry. "Ah." Owen looked flustered, his mouth slightly open, and he couldn't say a word except for the sound of surprise. His whole body couldn't help but shrink back, shaking as if he had been electrocuted. "Why are you nervous? We are old friends," Li Ming said with a smile, but the look he gave Owen was like looking at an ant that could be crushed at any time. "Okay, I don't have time to waste with you. Since we once had an unforgettable friendship, I will send you off." As he spoke, he threw a green fingertip-sized object into the cell, and Li Ming turned around and left without even looking at it. Tiffany was confused and didn't understand Li Ming's intentions for a while. He was an old friend and a gift, which made Tiffany nervous and worried that something would threaten her life. She turned her head to look at Li Ming, who was walking away, and then looked back at the cell. The green object exploded in the air with a bang before it landed, and countless vines sprang out of it, with a long thorn at the top of each vine. Just by looking at it for a while, Tiffany's body trembled, and she couldn't help but shrink. She quickly retreated and continued to follow Li Ming closely, and then a miserable cry came out from the cage behind her. Ah! The sound stopped abruptly, before it was completely uttered, as if someone suddenly pierced her throat with a sharp weapon, while she was shouting. The voice made Tiffany tense up. She could not help but secretly glance back, then immediately lowered her head, trembling and cautious. Li Ming walked out of the prison cabin without stopping, and headed straight for the storage cabin. As he walked, some information had reappeared in Li Ming's brain, which was about Owen and the Earth. The Earth was Li Ming's home planet, and he left in a hurry, because of Li Ming's mistake. This was not in Li Ming's plan, because Owen's existence might pose a threat to the Earth. However, Li Ming had just found information about the Earth from Owen's brain. Although it suffered some trauma, it was not a big problem. It was only concentrated in country A, which took in Owen, and had little impact on other parts of the world. But Li Ming would not allow the other party to continue to exist. Thinking in his mind, he walked under his feet, and came to a hatch again. Before Li Ming could do anything, Tiffany behind him took 2 quick steps forward, and swiped on the hatch. The ripples reappeared, the arc flashed, and the hatch disappeared. After entering the door, a huge space appeared in front of him. This space might be the second largest in the entire spacecraft after the main cabin. It was not only spacious, but also the items were arranged in an orderly manner. Small items were displayed on shelves, and large items were neatly stacked in separate areas. Li Ming slowed down his pace, looking around with his eyes, and sensing with his consciousness. Tiffany continued to follow Li Ming. Just when she was about to say something, she suddenly looked back. After making sure that there was no one behind her, she boldly said, "This is where Terran stores looted items. Most of the items may not be of your liking, but there is one thing that may interest you." Tiffany said so, and quickly came to a huge object, pointed with her hand, and said, "You can take a look at this." Li Ming's eyes turned, and he looked at the huge object that Tiffany pointed at. He immediately saw the origin of the object with a simple look, but his expression was calm, and he just said casually, "Star altar stone." Star altar stone is not a real star altar, but just fodder. It needs to be strictly processed and made before it can become a star altar and be used. This is the cognition in Li Ming's memory. He said the name of the item and his body had already approached. As he approached, Li Ming noticed something unusual, narrowed his eyes slightly, and looked at it more seriously. Seeing that Li Ming recognized the object at first sight, and approached with interest, Tiffany continued to say, "This star altar stone is not ordinary. It is incomparable to ordinary star altars. This is what our boss found during a looting of the Alliance. It's just that the power of this star altar is too strong, and it can't be split or cut, so it has been in the warehouse, but this thing is definitely a rare thing." Tiffany continued, and she looked confident, as if this star altar stone was really extraordinary. Li Ming ignored her, and stared at the star altar stone in front of him, looking at it carefully. This stone is approximately square, with a length, height and width of more than 1 meter. It is black in color, and has a smooth surface. From the appearance alone, this star altar stone is no different from other star altar stones, but as long as you use the consciousness energy to sense it, you will immediately find something wrong. Ordinary star altars are only used to pull the energy in the body, so that the violent energy can be effectively controlled when advancing. However, this one is different. Its powerful pulling force has exceeded its own purpose. If it is used to advance, it will greatly reduce the speed of advancement. The pulling of ordinary star altars is controllable, but the one in front of us has a strong pulling force that is beyond the control of ordinary aliens. Such a strong pulling force will forcibly suppress the power of the nebula and affect the advancement. This kind of useless thing is useless. Li Ming used his consciousness to sense it clearly, shook his head slightly, and showed an unhappy look on his face. His eyes immediately turned to Tiffany. "You recommend this thing to me, is it, to harm me?" Li Ming's eyes were stern and his voice was a little louder. Although he was not angry, he was obviously not satisfied. Upon hearing this, Tiffany's face turned pale instantly. She bowed quickly and said without raising her head, I dare not. I dare not. Everything I said just now is true. Li Ming smiled lightly, raised his hand slightly, and said, well, I know this, but you must have a reason for recommending this thing to me. Li Ming's keen eyes had already seen through the other party's thoughts. Tiffany really recommended this thing to Li Ming sincerely, and she did not have any ulterior motives. However, Li Ming still needed to confirm the reason. After listening to what the other party said, and what the other party thought, everything would be clear. Knowing that Li Ming was not really angry, Tiffany was relieved, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said, indeed, I recommend this item for 2 reasons. The first is that there is basically nothing valuable in this storage compartment, because many items have been sold by Tyrann, so Tyrann is anxious to go to Pollexstar to see if there is any sale. The second is the origin of this thing. This stone was found on a ghost ship. Tiffany said carefully, her voice was not loud, and her expression was extremely cautious. Ghost ship? Li Ming's eyebrows tightened slightly, revealing a puzzled look. Does a ghost ship exist in space? Li Ming asked himself in his heart. Tiffany smiled lightly and continued, yes, it was a few years ago when I mentioned this ghost ship. The origin of this ghost ship is unknown. I don't know where it came from. When it was discovered, it was close to the Xianmang system. At that time, the Star Plunder Alliance was taking collective action. After discovering this ship, the various Star Plunder groups divided it up. Our boss Tyrann got this stone. In fact, in the past few years, Tyrann also felt that this thing was useless, but the things that other Star Plunder groups got were all sold at high prices, even priceless, but this thing has never been in demand. It is indeed a bit tasteless, but I think, since it was all from that spaceship, it makes no sense that it is not valuable. So, I recommend it to you. Tiffany said carefully, her words and behavior were respectful and humble, and everything she said was true. Li Ming said nothing, touched his chin with one hand, and looked at the star altar stone again. Chapter 150 Hidden Secrets. Li Ming seemed to be in a daze, staring at the huge star altar stone. He said nothing, and sometimes he stroked it with his fingers. His behavior was strange and puzzling. Tiffany was also a little overwhelmed, but the slightest change in Li Ming's expression was enough to make her nervous. Tiffany seemed to have thought of something. After hesitating for a while, she said, there is one more thing. I don't know if I should say it. Say it. Li Ming's eyes did not leave the star altar stone, but he just said one word. After getting the promise, Tiffany said boldly, among the items on the ghost ship, Elias also got a small thing. That thing is very small and light. It is black, and has a very smooth surface. Someone even offered 10 nebula powers to buy that thing, so I think this one should be more valuable. Li Ming paused after hearing this, and suddenly thought of something in his mind. He quickly looked at Tiffany and said, black, very small and light. Yes, it is. Tiffany replied without hesitation, but as soon as he thought about it, he smiled faintly and said, although someone wants to buy it, Elias didn't sell it. Wasn't you driving Elias's crow at the beginning? Maybe that thing is on the ship. Li Ming's expression was calm, and he didn't say much, but he had already guessed that the other party was talking about the item, and it was on Li Ming's body. Since you recommended this thing, I'll take it. Li Ming smiled lightly, turned his right hand, and the star capsule appeared. Tiffany was shocked when she saw the star capsule. After all, in terms of personal storage, the star capsule can be said to be a superior item. Not everyone has it. The blue light flashed, and the entire star altar stone was enveloped by the halo of the star capsule. Although the star altar stone was a bit large in size, its quality was also amazing. The star capsule also took a lot of time to store it. The blue light slowly faded, and the star altar stone disappeared from the ground. It was stored in the star capsule. Li Ming's operation surprised Tiffany, who was standing by and stared blankly, but she just smiled and said nothing. After putting away the star capsule, Li Ming looked around the rest of the storage cabin. As Tiffany said, there was indeed nothing of high value here. But Li Ming knew very well that anything that could be put into the star bag would be carried by Tyrann. For example, this huge and strange star altar stone, or something like this, that could not be put into the star bag, would naturally only be displayed in the storage cabin. Li Ming had no intention of robbing, otherwise he would have taken away all the items here long ago. I just wanted to visit your storage cabin, but I didn't expect you to give me a star altar stone. This matter, don't you need to discuss it with your brother Tyron? Li Ming glanced at him and said. Tiffany's face changed when she heard this, and she didn't know how to answer. She smiled bitterly and looked at Li Ming blankly without saying a word. Hehe. Li Ming didn't care. He chuckled twice and turned around and left quickly. Returning to the main cabin again, everything was still normal, but there was one more person in the main cabin at this moment. Li Ming's eyes quickly noticed the existence of the alien. He smiled slightly and sat down directly in front of the operating table. This extra person was Troy. Troy, Giant Horn System, Lagrazan, Power Civilization. When Tyron was deceived by Li Ming to go to Little Flame Star in the cruise bay, Li Ming was guarded by Troy. Seeing Li Ming's eyes, Troy bowed his head quickly, not daring to say anything more. Li Ming's eyes were like a perspective light, checking the people on the spaceship one by one, looking at Tyron, Tiffany, and Matt from time to time. Although he didn't say a word, the look made people extremely uncomfortable, fearing what would happen. After Li Ming's look, his eyes finally stayed on Tyron. Tyron is a beast-armored person, a power civilization, and his mother planet and galaxy are unknown. In the vast universe, beast-armored people are a wandering race. No one knows where they come from, or where they come from, even they themselves don't know, because most beast-armored people are born either on spaceships, on other civilized planets, or in the Star Raider tribe. People of this race are often severely discriminated against, and their treatment is even more underground. Becoming a Star Raider may be the best destination. Of course, most beastmen may become miners, slaves, etc., and end up in misery. These perceptions are all from the memory fragments in Li Ming's brain, but there must be something hateful about pitiful people. Beastmen are brutal and violent, and are often dangerous. After learning the information of everyone here, Li Ming's attention began to focus on another place, Parlik Star, which is the destination of this spaceship. He scanned the people in front of him again, and a low and weak laugh came out of his mouth. Li Ming chuckled twice and said, "Don't be nervous, everyone. Since we are on the same spaceship, we are people on the same ship. In addition, we knew each other before, so we can be considered friends. Since the goal is Parlik Star, who can explain the details of this star?" Li Ming's eyes returned to the blue light on the console and said casually. Tyron blinked a few times, and when he was about to say something, he hesitated and glanced at Tiffany. Tiffany immediately understood, and after thinking for a while, she said with a smile, "What do you want to hear about?" "I don't know much about Parlik Star, just tell me," Li Ming said casually. Tiffany fell into deep thought again after hearing this, and continued after a moment. Parlik Star is also known as the Parlik Star Plunder Camp. There are 2 Star Plunder groups on it. One is the Sunan Star Plunder Group, led by the brothers Ismail and Israel, and the other is the Moching Star Plunder Group, led by Silalia. Parlik Star Camp only accepts visits from Star Plunderers. Small groups like us can go there to trade, or join the temporary Star Plunder Alliance. Tiffany said seriously word by word. Li Ming listened carefully, and explored the truth from the other party's mind. After nodding slightly, he said, "What is the purpose of your trip this time?" Tiffany smiled bitterly and said, "Since the first Star Raid a few years ago, we have not gained anything, so this time we went to Parlik to see if there are any temporary alliance activities, so as to gain some benefits from it." "Oh." Li Ming smiled and nodded, his eyes turned, thinking about something, but he didn't speak. The main cabin returned to calm again. Although Li Ming didn't speak, a certain information in Tiffany's mind had been captured by Li Ming, which was about the real purpose of this trip to Parlik. There are indeed 2 major star raiding groups on Parlik, but these 2 major star raiding groups are composed of small groups like Tyron. When there is no plundering plan, these small groups wander around, act on their own, carry out some small-scale star raiding, and gain benefits. But once there is a star raiding plan, these small groups will receive information from the alliance and start to gather and prepare for action. But this information is confidential information and will not be easily disclosed before gathering. After all, once the plundering information is disclosed, the star raiding plan may fail. Tyrion went to Star because he received the gathering information. However, Tiffany did not reveal this information to Li Ming. She deliberately concealed it. With Li Ming's sharp eyes, this information was easily searched, but he did not say it out loud. He just had some interest in his heart. Thinking in his mind, Li Ming's eyes had already turned to Tyrion. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, and he said, "Brother Tyrion, I see that your small group is small. This time you go to Star, you may participate in the alliance action. Why don't you let me join you?" This. Tyrion was shocked and opened his mouth a little. He was very surprised, and even couldn't believe it. He looked at Li Ming with his green eyes, and then looked at Tiffany. He didn't know how to reply. Li Ming saw this move. It was obvious that Tiffany was the think tank of the Tyrion Star Plunder group. This Tyrion didn't seem to have any ideas. Tiffany understood Tyrion's intention, and hesitated at the moment, not knowing how to reply. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.